Kuala Lumpur. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Top 8 of Pro Tour Kuala Lumpur 2008. I am your host Rich Hagan alongside Bill Stark here in the booth for Randy and BDM, and we are watching a killer marquee matchup between John Finkel of the United States of America and that man Guillaume Wafatapa of France. Constructed master, but here in a limited Top 8. Finkel, absolute god of any format you care to mention. Wafatapa, outstanding player, and there is John Finkel, looking pretty much as he ever does, pretty taciturn, but we're pretty happy with his deck, and I guess he is too, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. He didn't get the start that he wanted there, I think, with that one drop into another one drop instead of a two drop, which he has plenty of. But yeah, I do like his deck in this matchup, in part because his opponent's deck was cut by Ming Shi into half.
So Finkel's away with a Mosquito Guard and a Gold Meadow Harrier. He lays his third land, comes in, pops in for two. Wafatapa, also blue-white. He's got a slightly more controlling feel, some flyers at 3 and 4, and there comes another monster.
Yeah,
for
that's
Finkel.
that rare, the preeminent captain. And of course, if that's going to get in attack, it will put soldiers from his hand into play tapped and attacking. So that's it was a very solid pick for him to get late, and it looks like Guillaume is already under the gun here. It's his third turn. He's got to have something this turn.
And he does. He's got Weight of Conscience, which deals with the preeminent captain, at least for now. Eventually, he will look to remove that from the game with a pair of monsters.
Potentially. As a 2/2 first striker that can still block, it's relevant for his Merfolk deck. Finkel thinks about getting in. Going to hold back on that.
2 mana, 3 mana, 4 mana. What do we got?
Oh, there's the Distant Melody.
Yeah, Distant Melody. So that nets him. Is that 3 cards?
Looks like it.
1, 2, 3. That's the sound you love. The sound of cards off the top of your library and into your hand.
Certainly the sound that John loves. And as I said before this weekend, that man is a man who loves drawing cards, even in this limited format where the conventional wisdom was to be aggressive. This game not working out so well for him so far in being aggressive, but he's got the edge on life, and Guillaume's a little bit behind on board with no creatures in play.
Yep, and there's a swamp. Guillaume's just got a little bit of black. He makes Stony Brook Schoolmaster. Now, when that taps, he gets little 1/1 Merfolk Wizards, and that again is going to blunt a Kithkin attack very nicely.
Yeah, and it actually makes it really tough for John to utilize his Gold Metal Harrier, which he might normally use to stymie the blocking ability of that creature.
I won't be tapping him anytime soon.
No.
There is Wafatapa. He's on 17 life right now, 0-0. In the background, you see Marcio Carvalho deep into his first game. 15 now, Wafatapa.
Looks like reporting from the floor, Scott John said that Mike Ron managed to land his turn 3 Jace.
Yeah, we like that.
Only to see it taken out on the following turn by a Changeling Berserker from his opponent.
And we don't like that.
Mike certainly doesn't.
No, absolutely not. Not that we're biased here or anything. All right, so it's Wafatapa having a look. What's he going to do here? He's got a Plover Knights in hand. Redeem? Is that Redeem the Lost?
It looks like it. I saw it in his pile of playables.
Does that feel like a solid card? I don't know. I wasn't expecting to see that in play in the top 8.
Well, it's one of those things where it clashes. Clashing gives him the opportunity to get more cards, and so to see more cards, that might be something he's looking for. But if you're in a control deck, you're not playing a lot of creatures, sometimes you can't afford to have the ones that you have die. It might be something he's playing for that reason to prevent the removal. John, of course, had the Weight of Conscience for the Stony Brook Schoolmaster, and managed to remove it with his preeminent captain, Gold Metal Harrier, and get in for 1.
All right, there is Plover Knights. Plover Knights comes out for Guillaume Wafatapa, 3-3 first strike. Now that, of course, can be tapped down quite happily by Johnny Magic.
And will need to be for John to get through.
That redeemed the lost, incidentally. As Scott Johns was telling us throughout the build process, Guillaume Wafatapa had it not just in his playables pile, but in his I'm playing pile. So he obviously quite likes it.
Yep, and that's a great. It's a great point, Rich. It's easy sometimes to try to double guess or second guess these pros, but the reality is these guys are at the top of the game. They're some of the best in the world. They've played through a tough weekend, and the reason they've been able to do that is because they have an innovative view on cards that other players simply don't take a second look at.
All right, we have the first game out of the way already in the Nikolai Herzog against Marcio Carvalho match, and Nikolai Herzog, bang, I am the winner, thank you very much. He had cream of the crop out and a bunch of fat guys, so that is 1-0 to the Norwegian Hall of Famer in really, really quick time.
Sure.
So Wafatapa comes in for his first damage of the top 8 with the Plover Knights.
Yep, and watchers watching at home might wonder why John didn't tap that creature with his gold medal Harrier. The reason is that he's looking to get in on the ground right now and is more interested in tapping any potential blockers that Guillaume might play after combat.
Let's look at Guillaume's deck then. He's got Stream of Unconsciousness at 1, little combat trick. At 2, Monsters, Judge of Currents. He's got Sig, River Guide, and Silvergill Dowser. As far as spells, a whole bunch of them. He's got Negate, which he was unsure whether he was actually going to play, so we'll have to check that for you. Research the Deep, Card Drawer, Weight of Conscience, Redeem the Last Wings of Velis Vel. Then at 3, Harpoon Sniper, that can clog up the board. A Dewdrop Spy, Stony Brook Schoolmaster, we've already seen. And also a Foot Bottom Feast, so he gets a chance to reload at some point. At 4, this is quite a chunk of his deck. Fairy Harbinger, Merrow Harbinger, Dream Spoiler Witches, Inspired Sprite is there, so that's the looter ability on that one, and Distant Melody, so he wants cards as well as Finkel.
Yep.
We've seen the Plover Knights, there they are in play, and then at 6, he's got a pair of Ether Snipe, so that is a big card for turning a game around.
Yep. And John has a huge advantage on board. I was expecting to see Guillaume play some type of effect during the combat step there to help gain some traction. He wound up taking 2 extra damage from the skirmishers, and he's got to go into the tank on his turn here to try to figure out how he's going to crawl back into this game. If John's got the Surge of Thoughtweft or a Wisenson in his hand, we could be seeing this game end on the following turn or within 2 turns. So things are looking rough for the Frenchman.
I guess that, and in fact, there we go.
Yep, there we go.
That is 1-0 to John Finkel. Guillaume Wafatapa, we said he's imperturbable, but he will not have enjoyed that beating. I'm not sure what he has got after boarding. So as things stand, that is 1-0 to Nikolai Herzog. On the back table against Marcio Carvalho, 1-0 to John Finkel over Guillaume Wafatapa. And so while they're sideboarding or not, let's take a look at John's actual deck then. At 1, he's got 3 creatures. He's got the Gold Meadow Harrier, the Gold Meadow Stalwart, so that's the perfect 2-2 start for 1, and Mosquito Guard.
The 2 casting cost area, though, Rich, is where it gets really interesting. And, of course, he's got some removal spells in the form of weight of... the weight that he used in the last game. He's got Double Sin's Air, which is really critical in his deck because of the amount of Kithkin spells he's playing. He's also got the Wizen Sin, which, as you pointed out, he's going to search up with that Kithkin Harbinger most often. And he does have a couple Kithkin Great Hearts, but one of the really interesting things that he managed to do was draft an overwhelming number of Kinsbale Skirmishers.
Yep.
Now, in the first game, we saw him play 2 of them and use them to help get in a couple extra points. With the 3 1-drops that he has, that really helps him push into the red zone on turn 2 and get that aggressive start much, much easier.
What's a little bit scary for Guillaume Wafatapa is that in that game, actually Finkel didn't have the best possible start by any means.
No.
And it was actually in what turned out to be the mid-game that Finkel drew away. And you're left as Wafatapa thinking, yeah, well, what happens if he does go? Here's a guy, here's Sen's Air, and then here's Skirmisher, another Sen's Air. Wow.
Yep.
Then what do I do?
And I would look to see Guillaume Wafatapa actually board some creatures into his deck, even just anything. A Gold Meadow Dodger, if he picked it up 15th pick, can still trade for a Mosquito Guard on turn 1.
For sure. So at 3 then, John Finkel's got the Avian Changeling, the Kithkin Harbinger, Pestamite, nice tricks with that. The Preeminent Captain, we saw that come down, it got weighted by Wafatapa, and also the 0.42 of a Serra Angel. the Kithkin Zephyrnaut.
Yep, and that was a great pick for him to get late. It's one of those evasive creatures. 4-drop's a little bit weak for John. He did pick up at least one balloonist that we saw. He had that distant melody in his 4-drop for spells, which you saw to good effect. He drew 5 cards over his opponent, who's the quote-unquote control deck, which is pretty impressive for the aggressive deck. His curve kind of tops out from there with the Mold Drifter. Pretty much his only 5-drop, and that's reflected in his mana count. Most players say 17, 18 lands in this format, and at Worlds we saw Adam Chambers, who strictly played 18 and always drew. John says, nope, I'm the beatdown. I've got 16 this weekend.
Wow, 16. Now that is tight.
Yep.
All right, so they're shuffling up for Game 2. Still no news of the other quarterfinals. We've still got nothing, 0-0 between Ming Shi of China and Joel Calafel of Spain. And the last we heard with Roan against Pascali, Roan had his Jace Bellerin thoroughly dismissed with a 5-3 haste guy. So 0-0, 0-0, 1-0 to Finkel, and 1-0 to Nikolai Herzog.
Absolutely. Funny story about John Finkel. I got up this morning to check some of the YouTube coverage and see some of the comments. A user by the name of Claire Finkel was posting on the videos of the standings of John yesterday. She said, John Finkel is #1. My son is #1. Go, John. I love you, sonny boy.
That's outstanding. Now, of course, you would think that's some little prankster somewhere having a little bit too much time in their bedroom.
I thought that initially. I talked to John previously before the round. He said, yep, that sounds like his mom.
Excellent. That's what you like.
Yep,
behind every great man, an even greater woman. Well done, Mum. Nice to hear you, Claire. And if you want to get in touch with us, come and join us on the forums. Anything you want to say, anything about Bill's glasses, my hair, too ginger, too English, too fat, whatever, join us there and let us know who you think is going to win Pro Tour Kuala Lumpur 2008.
Absolutely. John shuffling up.
That's something that's changed over the course of Magic. If you go back, well, perhaps back to the time when first time around, Finkel was the top of Magic. There was a lot of discussion about how players shuffle. People were very suspicious of each other. And, of course, that's still true to an extent. We saw at Worlds last year in Paris that one player got disqualified for some entertaining shuffling techniques, shall we say. Mm-hmm. But in general, the way players shuffle is now just a given part of the game. I've been on tour now for a year. I've yet to see someone, apart from that one incident with Paris, seeing anyone complain about the way players shuffle. It's kind of got there now.
Yeah, many years ago there were different rules about shuffling, and I'll recall one Pro Tour with, I believe it was Terry Boer, shuffled for over an hour for a game, simply to get into the head of his opponent.
Oh, my good lord. All right, so we are underway in Game 2 of a maximum of 5. Guillaume Wafatapa is the beatdown in Game 2.
Getting the Silver Gill Dowser right in there.
Absolutely. That's not what Silver Gill Dowser does.
Yeah.
It sits there and does things in your opponent's turn.
John had to start on a mulligan and has not hit the lands he wants to see. He's got 3 islands on the board. Going to evoke the Mold Drifter to try to get in the game. When you're this far behind with the beatdown deck, it's kind of scary to think about how this game's going to end if you're John Finkel. However, as we saw last game, Guillaume really didn't have much coming out of the gates. He didn't do much for the first couple turns, and John was able to overwhelm that.
And there we see again, he lays a 4th land against an empty board and leaves it like that.
Yep.
So Kithkin Zephyrnaut is the offer from John. And interestingly, he asked, is that okay? So he must be expecting that Guillaume may well have counter magic.
Yeah, some type of broken ambitions is really good because it counters that play right there. It turns out he's got the rogue spy there, Dewdrop Spy, allows him to take a peek at top of John's deck, and will potentially give him a blocker for the Kithkin Zephyrnaut.
Yeah, so he sends it in.
He won't be blocking until he's no longer on the beatdown, that's for certain.
Mm-hmm. So there we see Finkel's hand. What do we got there?
Yep.
He draws.
And of course, Guillaume knew that was coming with the dewdrop.
He's drawn the preeminent captain. He's got a Kinsbell Skirmisher in hand. More importantly, that's a Plains gone down into play.
Yep.
And now his hand starts to actually look like it has some stuff going on. There's coordinated barrage in his hand, preeminent captain, the skirmisher, and I think that's distant melody for somewhere down the line when he feels maybe he's stabilised, he can get in front.
Yep.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the table, Guillaume Wafatapa looking at a couple of lands, and Fairy Harbinger, Dream Spoiler Witches. It's interesting that Dream Spoiler Witches, the kind of card that's worth a splash.
I think it is if you're in the right type of fairy deck. It did go down a little bit in value with the introduction of Morning Tide, simply because the deck, the fairy deck changed. Actually, it turned into more of a blue-black rogues type strategy. It looked like John was going to play his Kinsbale Skirmisher there, and now he's holding back to think about possible tricks from Guillaume. Smart play. He does have the Fairy Harbinger, although it's unlikely that it will do more than just be able to block and then not die thanks to the Silver Geldauser.
All right, so still 0-0, remember, in the bottom bracket. Both matches there still going comfortably. Herzog remains at 1 to the good. We'll have a little word with Scott John, see if he can give us some more information on what's happening, in particular in that Rome match. We'll have a little chat with him in a bit. But there you see Guillaume Wafatapa. And that face that he's got there, well, he kind of always looks like that. He's just so calm. You never really see him frown. He very rarely smiles. And in fact, he's an incredibly affable guy, but you wouldn't really know it at the table. He's just this mask of, yeah, whatever, that's fine. Little nods, little hand gestures. And that's quite disconcerting to play against sometimes.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily fair to judge a player's personality by what we see on screen, because when it's game time, that completely changes. You'll have guys who are very talkative in real life, that stoic, looking straight at the table, trying to get reads on their opponent. And it's just it's a whole different atmosphere when they're in the hot seat.
Well, I guess that's why they call it putting on your game face.
Exactly.
It really is that. So Inspired Sprite is what Guillaume Wafatapa has gone looking for. Now, if you can get that down and online, that is a potential route to victory over Finkel. It is a long game card. It's a looter ability, Merfolk looter from the past, Cephalid looter, and that ability, if you're new to it, you tap it, you draw a card, that sounds great, and then you discard a card. On the face of it, if you're new to the game, that doesn't sound that great a deal. It's like, well, I drew and I discarded one. Aren't I exactly where I was before? Well, obviously, you really aren't.
Yep. And the interesting twist on this version is that it can untap if you play additional creatures of a certain type, which allows you to turbo through extra cards and potentially see more. If you're against John Finkel and you're looking for one specific element of your deck, that's going to be very key in allowing you to draw the extra cards, filter out the ones that you don't need, especially when you're sitting on a couple extra planes that you may or may not want in play.
Well, this one's slowing down somewhat. Finkel's sort of coming back into it. That Zephyr is clearly a threat. Wafatapa decides to send with the Harbinger.
Yep, that preeminent captain could make things real tricky for Wafatapa, putting things like Kinsbale Skirmisher or Wizenson into play, where all of a sudden a perceived attack just got much bigger.
Yeah, and one of the other archetypes that we don't really have here is like in the rogue deck, the prowling rogue deck, you have the Stink Drinker Bandit, and from nowhere, it's like all your unblocked flyers get +2/+1, and it's like 10 extra damage through the air, and you can't do anything about that with an Oblivion Ring.
Yep, and the key element of that deck is just having all those creatures being unblockable, and it really does go the distance to help get those in there.
So Finkel indicates the preeminent captain and says, is it right if I have this skirmisher over here? Does that seem fine to you? And then I'm going to pile into the red zone. Here we go.
Trigger him, then I'll trigger him.
So, just explaining what's going on, and out comes. We've got down at the bottom there.
Looks like he targeted his Zephyr to get +1/+1.
4/4, 3/3,
and so it must be another Kinsbale Skirmisher. And if you notice, he stacked that so that his Sinzare would get the additional bonus from having that extra Kithkin creature in play.
Yeah, and that's the kind of play that you would automatically expect from a player in the top, any player in the top of a PT, especially someone like John Finkel.
Yep. Guillaume's turn to think. Got to try to figure out what play he's going to make. Certainly that Silver Geldauser will be activated this turn to save him some damage.
We have a match result, or more accurately, a game result on one of the back tables. Joe Calafel of Spain with his green-white splash red deck. He is 1-0 up over the first ever Chinese player to make a top 8, Ming Shi. So Calafel leads by 1-0 there. All right, so
this
John,
is quite the bogged down combat step. It's going to be a heck of a red zone here, Rich.
Yeah, it really is. And Wafatapa always takes his time to think. He's pretty relentless about that.
Yeah, and he's got plays. The Inspired Sprite does have flash, so he can put that into play and play this turn. It's interesting to know if it survives and he hits that swamp. The Dream Spoiler Witches that is also in his hand is a wizard in addition to being a fairy, so it would trigger the flash creature and allow him to get a couple extra cards in there. He is going to play the 2/2.
We've got the official deck list in, and it turns out that, yes, Wafatapa is in fact playing the Negate, so he has another counterspell there to go with his Broken Ambitions. All right, so Calafel then, 1-0 up. Nikolai Herzog, 1-0 up. What about Mike Rohn, Mario Pascali? Are they still in game 1?
Could be.
Wow, that's going a while.
They had the type of decks that didn't just end it within the first couple turns.
Sure, that is for sure. Unlike Nico, who went, here's a bunch of elves. No, pile in.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I yield priority.
Okay, so it looks like he's going to double block on the Zephyr and activate the
-4.
Dowser for damage.
Silver Guild Dowser is such a... When I say it's a miserable card, I don't mean that in a bad way. But my lord, it's a card that when you play against it, you think, I'm going to be here till Christmas.
There's that backbreaking coordinated barrage. We talked about that, and it's just going to be overwhelming. So that's going to take a significant chunk out of Wafo life. And again, despite starting out on the right foot and with John not pulling the land that he needed, Guillaume Wafo already on his backpedaling. He's just not having it work out for him.
All right, well, we've got a little story for you down from on the floor. Our man with the plan, it's Scott Johns. So, Scott, what have you got for us from down on the floor?
Hey guys, can you hear me right there?
Yeah, we hear you loud and clear.
I had the pleasure of watching this great battle on the back table here between Mario Pascali and Mike Rohn. This, as you saw, went a long time. It went back and forth. Rohn looked like he had complete control at one point, getting to do the whole elemental play thing suite with Sage of Fables and Flamekin Spitfire and Smoke Raider, all kinds of great things going. It looked like he was all set. Thundercloud Shaman came down, broke all of his toys.
Boom!
That's rough.
Suddenly, Mike Rohn is playing defense. He has to Whirlpool Whelm another creature to try and stay alive. He's desperately trying to get back into the game. The Whirlpool Whelm reveals nothing important on his side, and a Chandra Nalar sitting on top of the deck across from him.
No.
So, needless to say, that one is now 1-0 Mario.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's
so
rough.
the Italian goes up 1-0 over Mike Rohn. Thanks for that, Scott. Great stuff. And he'll keep bringing us all the updates from the back tables. You will not miss a thing here on Super Sunday number 1 of 2008.
Ooh, back in our feature match, John just managed a monstrous turn. He won the kinship off the Zephyr.
And we're done.
Yep, had a Distant Melody for 6 cards. That gave him the Weizenson he needed to put into play for free with the preeminent captain into combat. That was just
Something's popping.
A monster.
Yeah, and out in the crowd there, as Svi Moshevitz, amongst others, just looked at that and went, oh boy,
yeah.
Thank you very much. So 2-0 to Finkel there. We'll stick with this for one more game, see if Wafatapa can get back into the match. Then we'll head for some of the other matches that are still going on, still early in most of those. Yeah, now, if you're Wafatapa, what are you thinking? You've gone 1-0 down when there wasn't a great start. You've gone 2-0 down when there was a pretty hideous start. Where do you go? Where do you find the will? As a great player, you really understand what's going on. You can't lie to yourself and say, oh, I was just really unlucky. I don't know how I lost those 2. He knows exactly how he lost those first 2. So where do you find 3 wins if you're Guillaume Wafatapa?
Well, right now he's got his back up against the wall for sure, and he's... I'd be surprised to see if he reaches to his sideboard. It doesn't look like it. But I think you just have to dig down deep and just come up and say, you know what, I'm here to play. We got our back against the wall, but we're professionals and we just work with it and do what we can. You know, he might, to be honest, he might be thinking about what he's going to play in Hollywood right now at this point in time with the matchup and the games he's down. But I'm sure he's going to pull it together and try to put up a fight for the third game. You know,
Guillaume Wafatapa is one of what I might call the few true pros on the pro circuit. I had a great chance to sit with him at the Magic Invitational earlier last year. And I said, okay, now come on, Guillaume. You're a pro. You're in the top 10 players in the world. But what's the real deal? How much Magic do you play? And how much time did you just spend, playing the PlayStation, watching the DVDs, just sleeping? Well, come on, tell me truthfully, how much of a, quote, pro are you? And he said, well, I'll get up maybe around 12 or 1. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, there's the stereotype confirmed. That's the Magic player. Welcome to noon. It's early. And he said, then I go down to a bar, and I have the same table and the same 2 chairs, and I have a friend who's always there with me, and we'll start playing maybe around 3 in the afternoon. And I said, okay, that's nice. What do you play? A couple of hours? And he said, well, depends how close we are to an event, but generally we might finish around, 12 or 1. I'm like, okay, that appears to be 10 hours Magic.
Yep.
So, how often would you do that? And he said, well, 6, maybe 7 days a week. Like, okay, this kind of explains why you're there and I'm here.
Yep.
So, you know, fair play to him. But that really does mean he will know what he's up against. Here's Finkel with Wizen Sen out turn 2. The Dowser's down for Waffatapa. And still, Finkel, you wouldn't guess he's 2 up with a Wizen Sen in play. But he knows what kind of strong position he's in. Stony Brook Schoolmaster is up next for Waffatapa.
Good series of opens for Waffatapa. Having the 2-drop, having the 3-drop, especially a 3-drop that can clog up the ground like that. Definitely the type of opening that he was hoping for. It's like we said, you know, his back's against the wall. That's what you're looking for, and that's exactly what he got.
Yeah, but what he is looking for is a way to get that guy tapped without having to go into the red zone.
Go ahead.
Right, so Waffatapa untaps. Here we go with turn 4. Draws a card. Again, very solid. Another player who's just gone off tour to go to pastures new, Craig Jones. He was an absolute automaton when it came to what I might call the physical mechanics of the game. It didn't matter whether he was just about to die, whether he was on the verge of a victory. He would take exactly the same amount of time for drawing his card, untapping his lands, going through his upkeep. Have I got anything to do here? And that looks like one of the new cards. That's Research. Is that Research the Deep,
Yeah,
I believe?
Research the Deep, yep. It's going to let Guillaume draw a card, and then they'll clash to see if he gets to buy it back.
Okay, so there's the clash.
Okay.
That looks like Zephyr on top of John Finkel's library.
Yep.
Waffatapa gets rid of whatever was there. And the Zephyr John keeps, presumably?
Yeah, I'm thinking that's the right play. Having a 5/5 Vigilant Flyer is pretty handy.
Okay, so here comes Pestamite, end of turn, getting rid of the Dowser for a go.
Bit of a surprise there. Good thing to have for John in that situation. Allow him to get in a little bit.
And there you see John Finkel's hand, a couple of lands. I do love those Lorwyn lands. A fantastic idea. I believe it was Jeremy Jarvis, the art director, came up with the idea of pairs of lands. So if you've not done this at home with the 20 basic land, that they come in pairs. So you have these sort of mural effects as it goes from swamp to island, from plains to forest. And that's just an exquisite idea.
Yeah.
And the execution's great, of course, as usual. But I like those, and he's running some of those land.
It's neat, and it reminds you that Magic the Gathering isn't just about the Pro Tour or players battling at this highest level. It's also about loving the art, loving the stories, loving a number of other things that a ton of people at Wizards of the Coast put effort into the game. So.
Yeah, we went out to the Batu Caves, one of the great local attractions here. We took a couple of friends of yours, Brandon Scheel, Matt Cheeks Hansen, and also Zach Hill. And Zach was saying, you know what, when I first discovered I loved Magic, I ripped open my first booster. It was Phantasmal Forces, the first ever card I saw with that incredible rainbow artwork. And you know, that's a guy who, he's only 21 now, but he's been playing Magic for the best part of a decade because of a Phantasmal Force.
Yep.
Outstanding.
Yep.
All right, so Waffatapa.
Draws his card for the turn, goes into the tank.
Does he look 2-0 up? Does he look 2-0 down? What about him? 2-0 up? 2-0 down? You've no clue, have you?
Nope, they're just playing cards. Any other match. Could be an F&M. Same mentality. Looks like Guillaume might be missing a land drop. It's tough to tell for certain, but he might not have another land in his hand despite drawing that extra card.
Yeah, that looks like a handful of spells.
Which normally would be something that you want to see, provided you could play him. But in this situation, John's about to unload. He's going to hit that critical 5th mana point, that threshold, and everything's going to come out, and it's not going to go well for
Waffatapa. Although that is nice because there's Weight of Conscience, and that does mean, and here we go, so this is what we said, we needed a place for him to be able to tap the Stony Brook Schoolmaster. He does that. Hooray, thank you very much. I'll have a token, Wizen Sen in the bin. That was nice.
Absolutely.
Nonetheless, you're absolutely right. Without that 4th land, Waffatapa has a lot of spells at 4 and above, remember? Fairy Harbinger, Merrow Harbinger, the Dream Spoiler Witches, Inspired Sprite, Distant Melody, the Plover Knights, Double Ether Snipe. This is not a deck that wants to sit at 3 mana. It really is not.
No, and you mentioned tapping the Schoolmaster, how Weight of Conscience is another way to do that that came from Morningtide. One of the other cards that a lot of the Merfolk players have been trying to draft this weekend is Moth Dust Changeling. Of course, that's the 1/1 shapeshifter for a blue that allows you to untap creatures you control to give it flying. Now, Guillaume doesn't have any, unfortunately for him, but it is one of those interesting cards that helped an archetype from Morningtide that we didn't have previously in Lorwyn.
Yeah, now, of course, Magic is a game of terms, and we bandy concepts around. And one of the words there is an enabler. So that's what we would call that, where it literally, here's a Moth Dust Changeling. By having it in play, it enables you to tap down the Stony Brook Schoolmaster and get on with doing good things, like having free 1/1s.
Yep, and Antonino De Rosa, the Italian/American, just walked up to the booth, gave us a grin. I'm sure he wishes he could see how his buddy Pascoli's doing in the feature match area.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. All right, so board position, 2-0 to Finkel. Wafatapa's down to 14, Finkel at 20. And
Speak of the devil, Scott Johns from the feature match area. Mario Pascoli up 2-0.
Changeling Berserker coming smash, smash, smash. That's a real MVP for him so far. Got rid of Jace Bella in game 1 and has now got on the verge of getting rid of the Pro Tour Geneva champion.
Absolutely. It looks like John just used his weight of conscience to deal with Silver Gill Dowser, which is otherwise a big problem for his deck. But he's not quite able to get through as much as I'm sure he would like against the mana-shy Guillaume Wafotapa. It's going to be interesting to see if Guillaume can hold on despite missing some of these land drops. Looks like he's going to try to get in with that Schoolmaster, and he does. Gives him another 1/1 token. Whoops.
Coordinated
Keep the token.
barrage.
John's got the coordinated barrage, but it looks like we got a counter for it.
Counter target non-creature spell. It's narrow, but if it's non-creature, it's a counter spell.
Does what you need it to right there. Still, those 1/1s with the Stony Brook Schoolmaster, especially if John's going to hit on that.
Hello.
On that
And not
kinship.
only did he hit on the kinship, it's what he hit on the kinship with. It's the Kithkin Harbinger. Now, of course, the Wizened Sen's already gone, so we'll have to see what he would go out to get. But, of course, he's got so many options.
Yeah, he's got a lot of juicy targets.
Yeah.
The Preeminent Captain, Surge's Thought Weft, any number of his creatures, a second Sin's Heir.
A
There's just
balloonist.
Yeah, there's
yeah, the options are many.
a lot of opportunities for him. And, of course, that means he's going to hit the kinship next turn on his Zephyronaut for certain.
Yep. Of course, he could decide not to search. Hody, hody, ho.
I don't know how they do it in the UK, but...
Oh, you funny man. That's outrageous. I'm looking at all the day one rejects from the UK out in the floor there. Yes. Disgraceful.
Oh,
all right. Okay, thanks for that, Bill. I wondered how long that was going to take. Well,
hey, to be fair, your top 8 projections were a lot better than mine.
well, we didn't do badly, actually. I mean, Steve Sadin was very, very close. Potovin had a positive record. And some of the guys you didn't actually name for top 8 have done very well. I mean, I know how much you expected Mike Rohn to do very well, even though you didn't have him in your top 8 at the start of the weekend.
Yeah, we talked off camera, and I said 2 Dark Horse American candidates I had. I actually picked Luis Scott Vargas, LSV to his friends, and Chris Lockman. But John Finkel and Mike Rohn were my 2 Dark Horse candidates, and they're sitting here playing in the top 8, so that's pretty exciting for me.
Just to let you know what's going to be coming your way, we're going to go and see Nikolai Herzog's match pretty soon. Once that next game ends, we're going to head over to see the Norwegian Hall of Famer against Portugal's Marcio Carvalho. So we will see what will be game 3 of that match, what could be the conclusion of this one. But
Yep.
Wafotapa still fighting, because that's what Wafotapa does.
Yep, he's fighting to try to hit that land drop, but looks like he's still not coming up with it.
I saw Wafotapa in action first. The first time I was really impressed with him was seeing him in the top 8 of a Grand Prix back in 2006. And there in the quarterfinals, he was 1 game to 0 down. He mulliganed to 6, then he mulliganed to 5, took a hand that was 4 land and a spell. And basically he died 11 turns later, having drawn, I think it was something like 9 land and 2 spells. And what was great about it was that every turn you would have no clue what he drew. He sat there gradually dying, watching his life total eke away. But in the end, sure, he lost. But boy, he played hard with nothing.
Yeah, and the French players actually have a history of playing with their backs against the wall. We talked about Olivier Rouel this weekend, who was 0-2 to start with, and then managed to win back into day 2. And even when he came back to the game, I was talking to him at Pro Tour San Diego. He said he came back to the game. He was playing his first match at the Pro Tour back. It was an elimination round, so it was round that he would be eliminated from the Pro Tour. He was down a game. He mulled to 5. and just said, you know what, we got to win. Came back and wound up moneying that Pro Tour. So, you know, it's something that the French players have in common with one another.
Well, if you look at the life totals there, Finkel at 19, Waffatapa at 8. Things are not looking good for the Frenchman. Maybe this is going to be as far as he goes.
Yep. Still can't complain. Top 8, a good start on the Pro Tour Player of the Year race, a nice payday, adding another title or another element of title to your persona as a player, moving from being a constructed mastermind now to being a more flexed out type of player. It's been a good weekend for Guillaume Waffatapa, whatever happens here.
I also think it's been a good weekend for the Player of the Year race, because quite frankly, if Waffatapa had won here, and of course he still could, he is still on 7 bonus life, he is not dead, but if he had won here, then you would say let's look at a standard Pro Tour in LA, you would say let's look at an extended Pro Tour in Berlin in November. There are not many deck building teams that can compete with Waffatapa. I think, you know, Nassif, Shape and Herberholz would be 3 names that would spring to mind.
Sure.
Obviously, the Japanese as a whole would probably have a very solid deck or two coming into Berlin. But you would bank on Waffatapa to make one of the top 8s in those, if not both, the way he's been going.
Sure.
And at that point, if he wins the Limited Pro Tour at the start of the year, you're thinking, yeah, we're all playing for second place here.
Okay, so Waffatapa just made a pretty tight play there. He dropped the Fairy Harbinger as a blocker to deal with some of the flyers, but unfortunately, because of the position he's in, not able to utilize the search function simply because it would prevent him from drawing the land he so desperately needs to find.
Yeah, apart from anything else, we know that there's Ether Snipe in his hand. He's got a single island in play. He can't even evoke out that if he felt the need to. So he is really looking for land. We'll have an island, please, Bob. No, we won't. We'll have a spell.
He did get to trade for the Pestermite, which gives a little bit of momentum there, getting at least one of the attackers off the board. But John had the second one, the balloonist that he tutored for, right back into things. And that's really rough to face down that balloonist when it's sitting across from a Sen's Air, because things can just get out of hand here really quickly.
Okay, so research the deep. And he does need some deep research. Clash. Oh, now there is, the card he drew is an island.
Yep.
So is that going to be too late? He has at least got one now, though.
Yes, and he does have a Harpoon Sniper on top, which, if he's allowed to survive, would begin shotgunning every single one of John's creatures. Of course, playing the research there is it's a necessary evil, but it does dig John one card closer to making sure he hits on his kinship for his Zephyrdon. He did have a Plains on top. He gets to take that dead draw, stick it to the bottom of the deck, and he might have a Serra Angel on his turn again, thanks in part to his opponent.
Well, what we're trying to work out, I mean, is there a way back for Waffatapa here? Because he's on 4. We've got a Kinswell Balloonist down. If that turns sideways, one of the others, for example, Sen's Air, gets flying. That would be a 4-4. That's even without kinship on the Zephyr. It looks to me like we're done.
Is
there a way back? He lays the island, of course.
You never want to count him out, but he's got an uphill battle.
I'm looking at his hand here. He's got a Dewdrop Spy, which I don't believe he can cast because that's double blue. He's got Plover Knights, no. Sig River Guide, irrelevant. Ether Snipe, he can't cast. Research the Deep, he's got back. And that is Stream of Unconsciousness. He's like, I don't see how he survives here.
It is not looking good. He's got Plover Knights for the next turn if he can make it. Through.
Please, sir, may I have another turn? I don't think you can, Mr. Waffatapa. I don't think you can.
Did hold off the research the depths for the second time there, despite having mana up for it. That will benefit him to some extent, as I said, helping John not hit the kinship on the Zephyrdon.
Ming Shi, meanwhile, has tied things up at 1 apiece with Joel Calafell. 2 of the underdogs doing battle there, Blue-White Merfolk against Green-White with a red splash. So Ming Shi is on the board.
It's an interesting match to watch. Of course, those guys, 4 guys in the top 8 like this, it's hard to get fair attention paid to them, but it'll be interesting to see who comes out of that and what that represents about their chances in the top 8.
Well, we've got at least another 2 matches there. So here we go. Kinsbell Balloonist comes in. Sen's Air comes in. Presumably Finkel will give the Sen's Air flying.
Yep.
There we go. I'm taking these 2.
Yep.
So at this point, we've got Stream of Unconsciousness from Guillaume.
Yep.
And it sounds like
he's
from
got a
the
wizard,
floor,
so he draws a card.
Sounds like from the floor we're getting our first result of a finished match. Looks like Mario Pascoli is going to take it 3-0 over Mike Hron on the back of Chandra Nalar.
So that is the first of our 4 Pro Tour winners gone from the top 8. Mario Pascoli, the Italian reigning champion, sweeps Mike Hron 3-0. Wouldn't have expected that. I guess those 7 removal spells, Thundercloud Shaman, Chandra Nalar.
Yeah,
Wow.
His deck just seemed favored against Atron, and you never want to count Atron out. He's a very solid player. He's very good in limited, but the deck Pascoli's deck just looked like it had him.
So,
Guillaume Wafatafa going to attack again with that Schoolmaster. He's just going to make as many merfolk as he can. That'll be a placeholder block.
there's
the
a
6th land for that Aether Snipe. That's going to be big at helping him get back into things.
Yeah, but there's still a Zephynaut. Have we got... No.
Looked on the
He
kinship.
looked for the kinship. That would have been game, set, and match.
Another land for John Finkel. Boy, he must be getting tired of drawing
Oh,
Good.
boy. Kinspell Balloon is back again. Aether Snipe doesn't kill it, just bounces it. Wafatafa, you are on borrowed time, my friend.
those. He's starting to hit those lands that he should have hit a while ago.
So he can get a Plover Knights down this turn. So that's a 3/3 flying blocker, but that is only 1 flyer. And with the Balloonist, that means Finkel has 2.
Right, and it'll be interesting to see if, with the extra mana, he'll have 2 left over, whether he'll play Research the Deeps or not. Because as I said before, that is going to help John hit on that kinship with the Zephynaut.
So in we go with Aether Snipe and Stony Brook Schoolmaster. Makes a 5th token. They're very pretty, but they're not doing very much right now.
No, they are keeping the ground bogged down sufficiently
Right.
against John's forces there. So that'll allow the Aether Snipe to get in as a 4/4, and maybe Guillaume will be able to get on the scoreboard a little bit more. Still, down to 2 life, it is not looking good for the Frenchman. Especially if John hits on that kinship. Let's see what he's got for post-combat.
14
This
to
will be
2.
This will be the important series of plays, what he's able to pull off after combat. Just got to think pretty long and hard.
And you look at that, and you would think that Finkel is the one under all the pressure. Wafatafa comes out. There's Aether Snipe number 2. I'll
Second
bounce
Aether
for
Snipe.
another turn on the Balloonist. Kinship whiff. Oh, wow. But I mean, is there any way back for Wafatafa from here? Can you construct a series of plays for us where there's hope for the Frenchman?
Absolutely. I think he's starting to stabilize here if he manages to pull off the Plover Knights on the following turn and hit,
Good.
say, one of his removal spells, something like that. All of a sudden, that's...
But he's still got Balloonist down. That's 2 flyers on the right.
Yeah, if he's got the blocker for one, the removal for the other, he'll be all right. And he's got an overwhelming force on the board that's starting to pose problems and concerns for Finkel at 14 life over there.
At 14, he's got a lot of monsters there. All right.
Looks like Guillaume has hit the land glut that he was trying not to hit before. He hit the swamp there.
So, his hand, Dewdrop Spy, Swamp, Plover Knight, Sig, the River Guide, Research the Deep.
With the cards in hand, it looks like Guillaume would have enough mana. Let me do a quick check here. Looks like he would have enough mana to play both the Swamp and then the Plover Knights and the Dewdrop Spy on John's turn. That could put John in a bad spot if he's aware that the Plover Knights will be able to block. He'll get in with the Balloonist and presumably the Senzair, which is lethal. The Dewdrop Spy would then trade for one of the creatures, and the Plover Knights would munch the other. The variable that we can't account for is what happens with that Kithkin Zephynaut. Because if he hits with that, then it's all over, and Guillaume doesn't have any choice.
Yeah. We said during the tournament centers, this is a set just made for drama. In the upkeep, you're going, what is on the top of that library? Because that is a passport to the semi-finals, sitting just on top of Finkel's deck, potentially. But meanwhile, he's got this turn to get through. Now, is he going to be worried? I mean, looking at that, we've got 4 from Aether Snipe, 4 from Aether Snipe, and in come a whole bunch of stuff. That's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 that he appears to be attacking with. Is he scared of Surge of Thought Weft? He can't sensibly let everything through.
No. He's put John in a position where John has to block, can't just sit back and do nothing, and that's what John's going to have to do. It's an important note to make with these pros. Just because they're losing doesn't mean they're not trying to win. So even though Guillaume's got a worse board position, his life total's lower, and he hasn't answered all of the threats that are facing him, he's going to still try to keep getting in there and causing problems for his opponent, and that could potentially put John in a point where he's on the back foot and all of a sudden switch the game. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens this turn. It looks like Guillaume's going to lose a bunch of his tokens, and the Schoolmaster 9 damage is going to get through, putting Finkel at a precarious 5. But it's all about whether or not he can hit on that, whether he can hit on the kinship, and/or find a way to push through the last couple damages through 2 potential blockers from Wafotapa.
Absolutely. And if you're Finkel, for all your skill, you're thinking, I would just like a little bit of luck round about now. Never mind all this basic land, pretty or not, murals or not. Let's just see a thing with a creature type. Here we go. He passes the turn. Untap. What is on top?
Ooh.
He
hit the distant melody, so
does
he's going to miss on
not
the kinship.
reveal.
But drawing
Wow.
drawing 4 cards is not insignificant. That could put John in a position where he's still in good shape.
Wow, we got a big crowd out in the hall watching this. I'm wondering, how come we are still in this game?
And you talked about how to imagine a position in which Guillaume could come back from this. And
You've got a good imagination, my friend. Well done.
Double Aether Snipe helps pull him back in.
Does he look like he's 2 points away from death?
Oh, he's got the bounce spell.
Bounce for the and he's nodding Guillaume for Tapper. He says yes. There's Distant Melody saying, I'd like to reload, please. A nod again.
Guillaume's out right now is John Finkel not making the correct attack.
Odds of that slim and none. And Slim did not make it to Malaysia.
No, did not see him this weekend. Oh, there's a Mosquito Guard, which is a combat trick. There's a Kinsbale Skirmisher, which would pump one of the creatures that can fly. It's not looking good for Guillaume Wafotapa.
A reminder that on the back table, Mike Rohn is already gone from this top 8. 3-0 to Mario Pascoli. Here we go. In
Yep,
the handshake.
Yep.
There it is. The Shadow Mage Infiltrator by 3-0 advances to the semi-finals. He is just 2 wins away from some serious piece of Magic history. Guillaume Wafotapa did his best. His best was not good enough against the Kifkin, even without killer draws. You think about Game 1, Finkel, not the best draw. Game 2, pretty bad draw. Game 3, any number of times that Kifkin off the top with kinship would have won in the game, but he still makes it 3-0.
Yep, it was the bounce spell that snuck by us there in his hand. It was tough to see, and that was what wound up doing it for him. And Guillaume Wafotapa had a really good run this weekend, and I'm sure he's not exactly happy with that result. I'm sure he wanted to win, but he gave it a good run. It was a tough matchup, and he did the best he could.
All right, so there you see, we've got Nikolai Herzog on the far side there. There he is, the 30-year-old Norwegian. He's up against Portugal's Marcio Carvalho. He's on this side of the table, nearest us. The score here is 1 each. We've got Nico Herzog, a massively green deck, a little bit of black. His killer spell is Final Revels at 5. Big mass removal spell, which isn't necessarily going to be that spectacular in this matchup. Much more likely, if he gets there, reminder that the winner of this match plays John Finkel. John Finkel has a lot of X1s and X2s. If Herzog comes out of this match, that Final Revels could be a massive part of the semi-final.
Absolutely, and it's important to remember with the Final Revels, Rich, that it's not just a creature kill condition, it's also a win condition, because some of the creatures in Nikolai's deck are very small. So if you get enough of those to outsource your resource your opponent, the +2/+0 portion of that card can often swing for lethal.
Yeah, it's fortify for 2 more, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Herzog is basically elves. He has 15 elves. We think that is a pretty critical number. He's got Imperious Perfect, which generates more elves, makes the ones he's got big. He's got a Ghostly Changeling. That was one of his tricky picks, he said, but he felt it was correct because he sort of wanted to cut off black as well. And as we see early here, it is Herzog who's getting underway. He's got a Ghostly Changeling on board. And is that a Winnower Patrol he's got there? What's with the ghostly changeling?
Yeah, it looks like a Winnower Patrol.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the board, Marcio Cavalli's got Treefolk Harbinger, and
ooh, what a flip!
Nice.
ooh, hello, that's not nice there.
No, the Imperious Perfect sitting on top as Nikolai Herzog plays that Guiltleaf Ambush. That'll give him 2 1/1s, and he's going to hit on the kinship with his Winnower
Imperious
Patrol.
is on top, right? Yeah.
Marcio Carvalho couldn't believe his eyes. Had to double check. Yep, that is an Imperious Perfect on top.
All right, so match tied 1-1. Carvalho at 60. Oh, you know what he did?
Okay, that's too much.
You know what he did? He missed. He missed his upkeep.
Yep, forgot to flip for it.
Wow.
Just as we get on camera, yep, as Scott John says from the floor, forgot to put a stop on like they do in Magic Online.
Absolutely. Now, this is a really key moment because you look at that face, that is a man who is not happy with himself and not happy with life. But this is where you have to put that behind you. It's one moment, it's one upkeep. Now, Nico Herzog, is the time you need to buckle down.
Yes,
And you got to wonder...
Don't do that. Don't put your head in your hands. What are you doing, man?
You got to wonder if Marcio Carvalho didn't ask him what the card was on top to sort of put him off the train of thinking that he needed to hit it in his upkeep. And, of course... Nikolai Herzog, and this is something a lot of pros do, not taking advantage of a recent rule change that allows you to put a counter on top of your deck in order to help you remember things like that during your upkeep. We can see on screen he's got a bunch of red counters off to the left where our viewers out here in the audience are seeing the life totals. All he had to do was put one of those on top, and it would help him remind him that he needs to hit that in the upkeep. And the card that we're looking for that's on the other side of Marcio Carvalho's board, which got the Lignify, is Leaf Crowned Elder, and of course that's the 3/5 Treefolk Shaman from Morningtide. It has kinship, and at the beginning of your upkeep you can look at the top card of your library. If that card shares a creature type with the Leaf Crowned Elder, you can reveal it and then play it without play it without paying its mana cost.
Yeah, I mean everyone likes free stuff, but Leaf Crowned Elder doesn't just give you free stuff; it gives you Ferraris and Porsches sometimes.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so Nico comes in. Scott Johns makes the point very correctly that we talked with Nico about, where do great players go under pressure. Well, pressure is what happens when you make a mistake like that. What looks like an elementary mistake, that's what people do at F&M.
Yeah.
Upkeep, I drew my card, never mind, and yet... you have to come back from it, and he's done it enough times, because I'm sure he made mistakes in 2004, because the perfect Magic player hasn't been born yet.
No, not yet. And it's important for folks watching at home who are going to think, hey, that guy just made a mistake, I bet I could beat him in matches. You might on a good day, but this is one of the top players in the game, and everyone makes mistakes occasionally, so that doesn't diminish his accomplishments or take away the fact that he's a very solid player.
It certainly doesn't. Now, we've got a little glimpse of Marcio's hand there. That looks like a Weed Poplar Shaman. Coming out. So in his upkeep, that's going to give -1/-1 to something.
You're talking about the creature Marcio just played?
Yeah, up at the top there.
Looks like a Black Poplar Shaman.
It's Black Poplar. Okay, so it's the regenerator.
Yep,
fair enough.
That's the one that'll allow him to get his creatures through combat pretty significantly. Earlier in the day, actually, I was speaking with Jacob Van Loenen, Chris Lockman, and Alex Kim, who's a young American pro. Alex Kim, I told him that I'd buy him lunch if he could tell me whether the tree folk from the Lorwyn block are coniferous or deciduous. He thought about it for a moment, and he said, "Isn't Black Poplar Shaman eating someone in the picture? I got to say they're carnivorous." I said,
okay.
"Alex, that's not what we were talking about."
Yeah, I like you mentioned Alex Kim there. I was very excited yesterday. A guy came up to me and said, "Have you got the standings?" And it turned out to be someone called Cynic Kim, who is the Korean guy. And I frankly assumed that he didn't really exist. It was just like a name that Wizards put into every tournament, just to mention, Cynic Kim, the Korean. I'd never seen him play, never heard him, didn't know what he looked like. And he came on, it's like, hey, wow, you actually exist. That's really cool.
Yeah. Okay, so we got a combat step here. It's going to get bogged down with Nikolai Herzog's Briarhorn Elemental, of course. That's going to giant growth one of his creatures. And it's going to prove for an interesting combat step for Marcio Carvalho there. He's got some things to think about, especially with that Death Touch, the Thorntooth Witch blocking one of those tokens. Oh, wow. What a counter. He's going to counter with his own Briarhorn Elemental to save his Thorntooth Witch, and that's going to really decimate Nikolai Herzog's board there. He gets to keep his Winnower Patrol and the Briarhorn Elemental with the Skeletal Changeling, but loses a bunch of his tokens.
So there you see the scores still tied at 1-1. Herzog on 20, Carvalho at 9. No sign yet that Herzog's missing upkeep is going to cost him, but we shall see.
Yep. Especially, there's the weed pruner.
And there is the weed.
Yep.
Okay, so that's going to do -1/-1 somewhere along the line.
Yep, and in the meanwhile, it's the Thorntooth Witch is going to take out one of Nikolai's creatures. Looks like it's going to hit the Briarhorn Elemental. That's the tree folk that Martial's working on here are really going to turn things back around in his favor. And it looks like with just 4 land, Nico's sitting on an uphill climb here.
Yeah, shakes his head. And Herzog now at 16.
Interesting fact about Nikolai Herzog. Just picked up a new job translating English television into Norwegian and doing some work for the National Geographic.
Wow. Now, that's one of those jobs that I suppose you know must exist theoretically, but you never expect to meet the guy who does it.
Yeah.
It's like the guy who puts the road cones out. I mean, where do they all come from? I don't think that's a Magic player, though. I'm only guessing.
Yeah. Woodland Changeling comes down for
Oh,
Nico.
how that is the killer. Nameless Inversion. That, because it's a shapeshifter, triggers the Thorntooth Witch. That is such a beating.
Yep.
Yes.
Deary me.
Allows him to
Nice
two.
roll again.
You can hear Nico there. It allows him to 2 for 2 with his opponent. Unfortunately, he's not going to get the 2 for 1 because he already had to trade the Briarhorn Elemental in order to deal some damage.
Not happy with that at all. At all.
Nico's going to try for a spring cleaning, targeting the Oblivion Ring. He's going to whiff on the Clash, which
So he gets
doesn't concern him that much.
he gets his
I
Imperious.
killed him perfect. You will lose all creatures.
But Marcy saying, "Hey, just want to let you know you're dead. Is that okay? You dead? I think you're dead."
Yep. There we
Nico
go.
says,
That's,
all right, I'm dead. All right, so that is 2-1 to Marcio Carvalho. Now, his best year was 2005. He was the winner of Grand Prix Lisbon on home soil, and he really likes Portugal because he also made top 8 in 2002 there, and locally he's made a GP top 8 in Bilbao, so 4 total there. And again, in 2005, for those of you who go back that long, not that long ago really, Katsuhiro Mori won Worlds that year. Marcio Carvalho was there in the top 8. He finished 5th there. So that's kind of his resume. As far as this tournament goes, he opened up like Finkel did with a 2-1 opening pod. So that was fine. His back was never really against the wall, to be fair. He then makes a 3-0 pod, so at 5-1, nice and middle of the pack going into the 3rd draft of Friday. He goes 2-1 again to get to 7-2, and then once again at the back end of the tournament. So when you're sitting at 7-2, you're playing against other people who really know what they're doing, and he aces that pod, and from 10-2, only 1-1 needed to be here on Super Sunday. Not a problem.
Yep.
As for Nico, pretty much similar record, although he needed a little bit more effort at the back end of the tournament, not least because he actually played in feature match action John Finkel, and that turned out to be a pretty epic match. And Herzog, you see there, he's talking to himself, he's not happy with himself, but he's 2 games away from the semi-final, and that's more than pretty much anyone else on Earth right now. Yep. So he's got to refocus himself. We say it again, and it feels odd to be talking about a Hall of Famer in those terms of letting mistakes get to you, because, you know, I've had a lot more experience than he has at making mistakes. I guess perhaps I'm just better at getting over them.
Yeah, I'm sure Nico will pull it together. It's the type of level pro that doesn't allow that type of thing to really disrupt them. And you're talking about Marcio Carvalho's accomplishments. You got to point out that he's one of those pros who people might not recognize at home, but is a consistent finisher. He's not the type of player you want to have to sit across from because you know he's going to give you a challenge. And because of his quiet nature, and he sort of doesn't really make big of himself, doesn't do much writing that I'm familiar with, people kind of aren't familiar with him, and it's a little bit unfair to him because he's actually a very solid and consistent player.
Mm-hmm. All right. What's going on in there?
Looks like they're...
What is going on there? All right, well, we've got news from Scott Johns down on the floor that Ming Shi has taken a 2-1 lead in his match against Joe Calico. He was 1-0 down, but is now 2-1 to the good. And it turns out there, that was a Drowner of Secrets game, and the Drowners just got there. Ming Shi absolutely on the point of collapse. Next turn, he was dead, but unfortunately, there were 0 cards left in Joe Calafel's library at that point. So Ming Shi moves to within 1 game of the semi-finals. Now remember that they are in the bottom bracket, already awaiting the winner of that one is Mario Pascali of Italy, who aced Mike Rohn 3-0. Nonetheless, you've got to hand it to H-Ron. Back-to-back top 8s a year apart. That's outstanding.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Pretty impressive indeed.
I think you can be pretty certain that when we go and talk to Mike at lunchtime, we'll go, "Are you disappointed?" And he'll go, "Oh, well, it was okay."
Yeah, Mike Ron, I think you could tell Mike Ron he just won $5 million and he'd just say, "Thanks, can I get it in cash?" You know, he just does not have any response on his face. We're starting to see a few smiles there from Nikolai Herzog off camera, and it looks like he's been able to shake off how he's feeling. Interesting to note, both of his parents are doctors and psychiatrists. I asked him if being psychiatrists had helped him gain any advantages in picking up mental reads on opponents and being able to read them, whether they've been able to tutor him on that at all. He said, not really, so it would be interesting to see if maybe they gave him some stress release techniques. Although, Nikolai Herzog is the type of player who says that getting reads on opponents, very, very important, very big deal. As we said with the John Finkel match, Nico respects John's ability to do that much better than he can, and just is so shocked at how much information players give away during matches.
All right, well, we have the deck lists here for Nico Herzog against Carvalho. So let's start with Nikolai Herzog. Final Revels, Ghostly Changeling, Nameless Inversion, nice removal, 2 Scheduled Changeling, 1 Bryhorn, a Cloud Thresher, that's a mighty card, 2 Elvish Handservant, a couple of 1-drops there. They get big against Giants, and that means Changelings, of course. Guiltleaf Ambush, we've already seen, Imperious Perfect, a pair of Jagged Scar Archers. Do you like them?
Absolutely, especially in a deck that's willing to commit to Elves so much that he's going to play 2 Elvish Handservants. They're great against decks with the Flyers, just pinging them out of the air because you don't have to wait on that and try to block with them. And they're just big creatures for 3 mana.
Big creatures for 3 mana. We can identify with those. We are big creatures ourselves. Then we've got 1 Lignify. Sorry to lump you in there with me. 1 Woodland Changeling, a Wren's Run Vanquisher, Violet Pool. That is such a lovely card. At 5 mana, you start thinking, that's pretty expensive. But when you realise that you get the 1/1 straight away, and suddenly, not only are you taking out their big guy, but you do it pre-blockers, then you've got your 1/1 guy, you put that in front of a 2/1, and suddenly that's a real turnaround.
Yep.
So nothing wrong with that. Cream of the Crop, a pair of Earthborn, Game Trail Changeling, 1 Lissalana Bowmaster, 1 Winnower Patrol, and he's gone with 17 land, which is about average for the format, I guess.
Yeah, usually 17 or 18, and I'm interested to see how Cream of the Crop plays out. As a rare, it's a card I personally haven't seen a lot of experience with, or seen it in play very much, and I haven't seen it in a lot of other people's decks, but I hear that BDM likes it.
Yeah, I know that's something that he was talking about on MagicTheGathering.com on the mothership, a card that he was very interested in seeing how it played out here. And a lot of players at the top tables, I've seen them in decks. I haven't really seen it much in action, but certainly players are thinking it's worth being in there.
Yep.
And I hear it's quite good with Cloud Thresher. Ghostly Changeling is the first play from Herzog. We've got Treefolk Harbinger down for Marcio Carvalho. Let's have a look at his deck list. He's gone with 16 land plus, from the draft, a Guiltleaf Palace. So he's got the black-green land, 10 forests, a plains, 5 swamps, and again, being able to play just a single plains, fair enough. He's got 2 Oblivion Ring, the Black Poplar Shaman, or as we've got it here, the Black Popular Shaman, which is interesting. I didn't know he was that well regarded.
Seeing it in the top 8 makes it more popular than I would have thought it would have been.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. A nameless inversion of his own, Skeletal Changeling, the Regenerator, Thorntooth Witch, we saw doing utterly naughty things in that 3rd game. Bogstrider Ash, Brythorn, Crown Clown. That's it's such a dull spell, but a 3/4 with reach for 4. It's so nice to have in your deck.
Yeah, it's an excellent Treefolk card.
Fertile Ground helps out with his mana, of course. Elvish Harbinger, Fistful of Force, a Trick, Guiltleaf Ambush. The Guardian of Cloverdale is a whopping great 7 mana, but if you get up there, it's absolutely fine. It's 4/5. You get 3 little guys. You can sacrifice them for life if you need to. Seek Guide Ash, a Treefolk Harbinger already in play. 2 of the Weed Prune and Poplar. So if he ever gets both of those down, that's -2/-2 to something, and that's something else that John Finkel's deck won't like. In fact, he may not like seeing either of these decks particularly.
No, the big hope for John in this type of matchup will be getting through on the ground fast. But with Marcio Carvalho 0-3 on the first turn and that Trifo Harbinger, he might be able to stall long enough to push it through.
Yeah, I played a Kithkin deck at Champs when Lorwyn came out, and it was absolutely fine, except against the Doran deck that went turn 1 Trifo Harbinger, turn 2 Doran, and all that, or turn 3 Doran, and all that kind of nonsense. And you just go, yeah, this is hideous. I cannot ever beat you.
Yep. Nikolai Herzog playing an interesting card there. Pulling Teeth. It's the discard spell for 2 mana. Clash with an opponent. If you win, target player discards 2 cards. Otherwise, that player discards a card. So it looks like that will force his opponent to discard 1 card. Keep the planes on top for the clash, and we see why. He's got the Oblivion Ring.
Just to let you know, at home, we do appreciate that there are a few technical issues with the internet at the moment. It turns out that I'm speaking too many words per minute, and there's not sufficient bandwidth available coming from this region of the world. True story, says Scott Larrabee. Thank you for that. So that's the deal. We are, of course, working on that to bring you the best possible coverage, evening in America, morning, afternoon now in Asia, and silly o'clock in the morning in Europe. Oh boy. If you're up at the moment, by my reckoning, quarter past 1, yeah, that's going to be 5:15 in the morning back in the UK. Scary. All right, so there's Lignify from Nikolai Herzog.
It's a play we saw from him last game, and that's the important creature to hit it on the Tree Folk that allows you to put cards into play for free. You want to stop that from just overwhelming you. Hitting
the
Death
Leaf
Touch
Crown Elder.
Yeah, the Leaf Crown Elder.
Yep.
Hitting the Death Touch, Thorntooth Witch, without having to pay for it, a number of other things, it's just not good.
All right, that looks like Guardian of Cloverdale on top of Marcio Carvalho's library. 5 mana in play. What's he going to do with that? He's going to keep it there, all right. So maybe he has land in hand. That would be 6, and then he's kind of just about there.
Again, Nikolai Herzog had the Spring Cleaning, the enchantment removal to destroy that Oblivion Ring, catches his kinship on the upkeep there. I was talking with some American pros earlier today, and they asked whether or not playing 5 games makes a difference in your drafting strategy, whether you're going to start drafting more sideboard cards or sideboard options instead of simply taking middling picks away from other players. Mike Ron was one of the players that we were talking about, and he said he wasn't sure what the correct answer was, but it was definitely something he was going to consider for the weekend. Of course, he's out of the top 8, got swept in the first round in a bad matchup, and now we're watching Nico and Marcio. But it would be interesting to see what pros ring in on with that idea.
That looks like a Jagged Scar Archers that have come down there for Nico. The board pretty much clogging up here.
Yep.
How many life here? 12?
Scott Johns, of course, has been in 5 of these bad boys, 5 Pro Tour top 8s to his name, and a little bit surprised not to see him in that Greater Hall of Fame consideration. But maybe, there's another year coming with not quite such a monstrous lineup as we were facing. So maybe there's hope for you yet, Scott. But something that Scott's pointed out to us is that another feature of the top 8 at these things, not just the 3 out of 5, but that once you're out of the quarterfinals, in order to make everything fair, because right now, the other players who've maybe finished their matches can be looking at what's going on here, the chance to, if you like, scout out for future matchups. They all get their deck lists, so they will get to look at their opponent's deck and go, right, you have 4 pieces of removal, you have 2 enchantment removal. That means that if I can play this enchantment, you haven't got a lot of answers to it, and so on.
Yep, and Herzog was obviously able to tell that his opponent's removal centered around the 2 Oblivion Rings, and is taking advantage of that by playing the Spring Cleaning, which is actually a pretty solid removal, because if you hit on that clash and he's got both of them in play, you actually get to get both of them. It's a 2-for-1. Anytime you 2-for-1 on Oblivion Rings, that's a pretty exciting moment.
Absolutely. Just to let you know what's coming, the next bit of our broadcast at the end of this game, either way, what we're going to do is take you to see Ming Shi from China, and in fact, there we go. There's sweeping up, and so
overwhelming attack there with the Briar Horman as the backup. Marcio knew what was written on the wall and checked his top card and quickly scooped it in. Watch him shuffle for the second one. Nico is going to take another look at his sideboard, see if he forgot anything that he should bring in, or if he should re-examine for the next game being on the draw instead of the play.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to leave them to it because they may take a while to sideboard and go through. And we are going to go and watch Game 4 between Ming Shi of China and Zhou Calafel of Spain. Now, Ming Shi is 2-1 up. Calafel kicked off. He won the first game with his green-white deck, a little bit of splashing for red. He's got double tar fire in his deck. He's got Rival's Duel. Rival's Duel's an interesting card. It's a card that, first of all, you read it and you're not even quite sure you've understood it. You're thinking, is this a contested cliffs kind of thing? Is this an arena feel? Yeah, they can go. Then you kind of say, all right, well, hang on. I'm going to have a bigger guy than his guy, and that's sort of the next stage of reading it. And then you go, wait a minute, if he's got like a 3/3 and a 2/2 that they share, or there's going to be a way to actually kill two monsters with this guy, and suddenly it's quite good.
Yeah, actually, it does lead to two for ones, and that's in a situation wherein your opponent has two creatures that don't share any creature types, and especially good with 3/3 situations, 2/2 situations.
All right, you are looking at Joel Calafel there from Spain, 2-1 down. He went 1-0 up. He still looks very calm under pressure. I mean, he's 19. What must he be feeling in a top 8 this powerful? I guess he must be quite pleased that we go to Ming Shi. So I guess that's as good a matchup as he could have hoped for, rather than being confronted with a Finkel or a Herzog or a Wafatapa or even a Rome.
Absolutely. Yep. And it looks like Ming's going to lead on a Merfolk, an Amiiboid Changeling, while the Spaniard has Winnower Patrol and Elvish Warrior. There's the turn 3 Drowner of Secrets. That's exactly where Ming wants to be, is milling early. When we look at, for players watching at home, when we look at this type of situation, typically we think of two players attacking one another as a race. So the resource is life, and you're trying to race your opponent and put them to 0 before you are with your creatures. This situation where Ming's going to be trying to deck his opponent is still a race. The resources have changed slightly, so it's Ming's life total versus his opponent's deck size, Calafel.
Yep. Now, just to let you know, you will not miss the decider of Nikolai Herzog's match. You will see that in its entirety against Marcio Carvalho. We will hold that for you, so you will not miss a thing. But listen, if you are in China and you are watching us and you have got yourself online and you have navigated your way to magicthegathering.com, you are really, really welcome here. It's great to have you here. It's great to see a Chinese player in the top 8. The globalization of the game continues. And you know what? There's enough people in China to mean if they keep expanding and this guy becomes a figurehead, we're going to start seeing the same kind of pro numbers as we have from like the Magnificent 7 Les Sept Magnifiques from France. And we're actually going to start seeing multiple Chinese players in the top 8 in the year of the Beijing Olympics.
Yep, and it's a bit symbolic, as you said. We're here in Asia. We've got an Asian player representing the top, represented in the top 8, and not only that, but right as the Chinese New Year kicks in with the Year of the Rat, and it's such a big celebration here in Kuala Lumpur. We got to see some lion dances at the staff hotel, and so it's nice to see that type of player get a little bit of a payoff for that. It's just symbolic, especially with those Beijing Olympics happening this year. So Ming's going to start milling, and again, if you look at it as a race, his life total is the resource he has. So he has 13 life, and that means his opponent's deck is the resource that he's attacking. Whether or not he's going to be able to race depends on the size of his opponent's deck. Of course, Calafel helped his opponent by opening on 7 cards, and he's going to draw 1 card each turn. So if his opponent has 2 Merfolk, he's milling 2 cards each turn. There are 3 cards that are going to be gone each turn. You can divide the total number of cards in the deck by 3, and you'll figure out how fast Ming's clock is compared to the 5 damage he's taking each turn with the Winnower Patrol and the Elvish Warrior.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things, when I was being taught how to play, I was taught by a mono blue control player extraordinaire. His idea of a good deck was sort of 24 islands, 24 counter spells, 12 removal spells, and then Aladdin's ring as your win condition. And I used to say, so I start on 20 life, right? And he said, no. You start on 19 bonus life. Everything else is irrelevant.
Yep.
And for him, life was just a resource. And it's like, what life you on? 2? No, I'm on 1 bonus life. And it's an interesting way of looking at it when you come at it from that side. It's like anything higher than 0 is totally acceptable.
Yep.
It's only when it dips below that 1 that I'm a little bit concerned.
Yep, and that's exactly right. We get a block out of Ming on the Elvish Warrior with 2/3. Risks a pump spell or some type of pepper smoke, anything like that, tar fire out of...
But Calafell has come out with Plover Knights, and that's mighty pressure once again.
Yep. Interesting play with the Drowner of Secrets. That Widower Patrol, if it hits on the kinship, Calafell chooses to reveal, Ming will still have the opportunity to mill the elf card off the top if he feels it's a significant threat.
In the upkeep before the draw step.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so Ming under a lot of pressure here.
Yep, going in the tank a little bit on his turn. He's in bad shape if he doesn't have some plays.
I wonder, when you are the first to do something, do you feel like partly responsible for the development of your country? I mean, it's not something you or I have ever done. I guess I'm the first Englishman in the booth, but that's not really the same. You look at someone like that, does he feel that he is the flag bearer for a country, or is he just, I happen to be Chinese, sure, and I'm proud to be Chinese, but I'm actually Ming Shi and I'm here to take people down because I play Magic?
It's an interesting question, Rich, and I think the best people to ask would be the Japanese players and even the Brazilians. Carlos Romão was sort of that figurehead for the Brazilians early on. Masashiro Kuroda was the first Japanese player to win a Pro Tour, and there were, Satoshi Nakamura many years ago was one of the first Japanese players to sort of globetrot. Okay. We had other players top 8ing PTs, things like that. So
I may be about to make a dreadful fool of myself, but I've done that before and will do again. Am I right that John Finkel's only loss in the Swiss was to coolest man alive Masashiro Kuroda? Is that right?
During the Swiss, I don't have the number on that. That would be interesting to find out.
I have a sneaking feeling that I may be right about that. Someone will nod or shake their head or go, "You're an idiot."
Sure.
But we'll see.
Back in the game, Ming Shi had a monstrous play on his turn with the Changeling hero, not only serving as a powerful blocker against his opponent's hordes, but also getting him back into life race and still able to mill his opponent. And of course, used the Drowner of Secrets trick during his opponent's upkeep to keep an Elvish Branchbender off the table.
One thing that always intrigues me, all these guys, they're very young, and you see that when they're playing Magic, they're shuffling their cards constantly, just flicking between two. And I'm wondering, in 50 years' time, how many Magic players are going to have arthritic hands? From all this, I've done this 50 times per turn.
For X amount of tournaments, for X amount of years. No, it's actually a sign of nervous tension most often. And if you watch some of the older players, some of the more experienced players who've had a lot of success at Magic the Gathering, they don't do it as much because they recognize it can potentially be used as a tell.
I tell you what, you talk about nervous tension. If you ever want a comedy moment at a Magic tournament, particularly at something like a PTQ, what I want you to do is just go and sit on the floor where you can see a whole row of Magic players, and you watch those knees pumping up and down as people are trying to decide what to do.
Yep.
It's an absolute festival of jogging on the spot. It's incredible.
Ming's going to take a look at his opponent's graveyard. One of the important benefits of playing a strategy like his where you're decking the opponent, of course, it's not as relevant here because he got to see his opponent's deck list, but you get to see most of the cards in their deck, and occasionally during the Swiss you'll have pros who recognize that the writing's on the wall, that they're not going to beat their opponent who's milling them, and they'll pack it in early to make sure they can hide some of the information, perhaps a Wrath of God or a removal spell that would prove relevant for the second game.
Absolutely. Now that's pretty advanced play. If you're thinking, what's Bill talking about there? That is the kind of thing that when you've played half a dozen years and you're kind of at top PTQ level and pro level, you're starting to think, what is my value in playing on here? I maybe have one out in the deck that can maybe get me back into the match. Much more likely he'll find out more, and I'd much rather have a 55% chance in the next game than make that a 45% chance. Yeah, so that is pretty advanced theory there, and I guess that's why we hired you, Bill.
Yeah. Many great writers like Zvi Mashevitz have said, Magic's a game of information, and the more you have, the better chances are of winning. So Ming made that great play with the Changeling hero last turn, but things are not looking good for him. His opponent refuses to cooperate in not attacking and not playing more threats. It just keeps cluttering up that board.
Yeah, I mean, Ming would have loved to have played against Guillermo for Tapper's deck, which round about turn 6 was doing, laying some land and not very much else.
Yep.
But this is pretty monstrous. There's a lot of power on the table. Ming passes the turn back to Calafell, and Ming's having a look how many cards, and he says, yeah, on you go. So, kinship, no reveal. So, yeah, on you go, draw. Just out of interest, would you ever run the bluff on that? So, you're in the situation where you get to your kinship, and you've got a kinship card there, but it's really good, and so you just put it back on top, in the hope that he won't mill it away, because obviously you would have revealed it if it was kinship.
Yep.
And then you actually get your good spell. Have you ever run that bluff?
I haven't yet, but absolutely, when the payoff for getting the card that's on the top of your deck is greater than hitting on the kinship, you definitely run that bluff.
Yeah,
and,
so
hope your opponent doesn't get the read.
All right. So, Calafell doing some math. 7's the number you're looking for, my friend.
She nervously going through those cards again off camera.
I think that's the longest silence we've had on the webcast so far. I do apologise.
It's just an interesting game. Sometimes you just
It
want
is.
to take a deep breath and look at what these players are doing and try to pick up on anything that they're giving away as information. As we see Calafell on camera, they're really focusing on his combat step and how he's going to play this out. No matter how overwhelming your board position is, when you're under the spotlights like this, you always wonder what your opponent could possibly have, because you're playing great players. They got here, not through accident. You start to second guess yourself and think, what's the worst possible thing you could have?
Yeah.
And then wondering whether or not they've got it.
Now, this is the monsters under the bed syndrome, as it's known, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yes. As they say, it's not the monster in the bed you want to worry about, it's the burglar outside the door.
Yep.
Only one on tap.
No, Ming Shi quickly pulls that creature into the combat step in the red zone to make sure it's the only attacker.
Yeah, just him, right? Okay, good,
Yeah.
thank you. All right.
We'll take 3.
Yeah, no room for anything else here. Sorry,
No.
very small red zone. All right.
Only one.
Mike Long, many years ago, people will remember his infamous name. Tried to pull something similar.
Ooh, next snap.
That'll
There
do
goes
with
the Blood
that will
Knights.
do with the attacker. That explains more than readily why he only wanted that one creature in the red zone.
And is that Order of the Golden Cricket?
It is Order of the Golden Cricket. I love that name. I love that game. I always want to chirp when I play it.
You see, I'm just delighted as an Englishman to see the word cricket on a Magic card, but that's a different kind of thing.
Yeah, it's an insect where I'm from, and it's something else where you're from.
Yeah, cricket. It's baseball for intelligent people.
No.
So, I'm going to get butchered for that in the forums. I so am. Never mind, eh?
Mill 2 more cards. Ming thinking through his upkeep. Does he have something he wants to do at the end of his turn? End of his opponent's turn, rather.
Well, if you're she, you're probably quite relieved that you're 2-1 up at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you look like you're behind here pretty comprehensively, despite that next snap to get rid of the Plover Knights.
Yep.
They're looking pretty lonely, just those 2 monsters, against an army of 5. Okay, so he untaps. Draws a card. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle.
Puts a card right into his hand immediately. Yep, shuffles through him again. Oh, got something.
It's Paper Fin Rascal, so that's going to get a little clash action going.
He kind of wants to win this clash, so he's got a 3/3 to block those creatures and trade for him.
Absolutely.
And that'll give him another Merfolk to help mill, but looks like Calafell gave him pause. Counts his deck. If he has Tarfire in his hand, as he has a couple, he could put that Clash trigger on the stack, Tarfire the Paper Fin Rascal, and kill it before the Clash resolves, giving the +1/+1 counter.
Neat.
Of course, the Clash would still then resolve. They get to see a card and perhaps move one to the bottom. But it's an interesting play to think of. The question after that Tarfire then would be whether or not Ming would remember to mill before it hit the graveyard. But
I do believe on top of that is another Drowner of Secrets.
Yep, and I think he wishes it was a 4-drop because
Yeah.
it looks like his opponent's got Battle Wand Oak, so Ming's going to lose the Clash, or I should say fail to win.
Yeah, fail to win, absolutely. Yeah. We don't like draws in American sport, do we? So the basic deal is if you don't win, you've lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He's going to put it on the bottom.
Yeah, so he accelerating the clock by that much not essential.
No, because right now he's got to make sure he's alive long enough for it to be relevant. And, you know, three cards a turn is sufficient now because with his opponent's draw step, it's actually 4. And remember, when you start the game, you've only got 10 turns under a 4 card per turn clock like that. And so at this point in time, his opponent's drawn 7 cards for his hand. He's drawn cards repetitively, and Ming's been milling him. So really, it's a pretty significant clock right now that's out there.
Calafell again offers the top of his deck in upkeep. One nice thing about, again, the kinship ability is that it teaches newer players about the importance of your upkeep and your draw step, because it's so often a kind of, you get initially taught, well, you just go back to square one with all your stuff, you untap your lands and you draw a card. But upkeep is where a lot of the subtle effects in Magic take place.
Yep, there's an interesting play that just happened here. The Battlewand Treefolk, or Battlewand, excuse me, was left on top, and Ming opted to mill it, and then his opponent decided to resolve kinship afterwards, putting the +1/+1 counter on his creature by revealing an elf. So interesting play, series of plays there.
Three cards for Calafel.
Looks like for sure there'd be a 2/2 flyer coming in this turn for Falafel, but it remains to be seen whether the rest of those creatures are coming in on the ground. And the problem with bringing all of them in, instead of just alpha striking with his opponent at 7 life, is that Changeling hero is going to be gaining 4 life for Ming while decimating his opponent's board, trading for the most relevant creature. So it's not something he can take lightly. He's got to consider carefully how much he's going to get in for.
Okay, well, Calafel's put his hand down, but I can tell you that he has a Tarfire in there. So the Tarfire is there, and one other spell. Let's have a look, see what he's got there. He keeps putting it down, the bad man.
Yes, looks like he's got a Tarfire, a Forest, and Lisalana Bowmaster, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and that's a good effort from like 32% of the card. I'm impressed with that. Well done.
Yep. He
So,
kind of gave away that Tarfire tell on the Paper Fin Rascal, but
absolutely.
he is going to go all in on this attack, and it's going to put Ming in a tight spot. He's going to have to figure out the correct blocks. Of course, that's going to be altered by the Tarfire, but it's important to note on the ruling interaction with the Changeling hero that life gain is only going to happen after combat has resolved, and before it does, state-based effects will be checked. Of course, if Ming's life total is not above the 1 life you talked about previously, he will lose the game before he can gain the 4 from his Changeling hero.
Absolutely.
So it could be a position here where we see him forced to trade his Drowner of Secrets in order to survive the turn after he's already put his second copy on the bottom of the deck, and that's just really insurmountable edge that he could be forced to try to overcome.
Yeah, we're starting to look as if we are heading for 2 games apiece. This game looks like it is going to go to the full 5. And you just look again at the depth of stories available in Magic when you play. We've only got 4 matches going here, never mind the 100 or so, 200 that we kicked off with at the start of the weekend. But you've got a 3-0 sweep in maybe half an hour, Mario Pascal over Mike Rohn. You've got another 3-0 sweep, Finkel against Wafatapa, which could have been much faster had Finkel's deck behaved. And then you've got Herzog Carvalho, green-black, going at it, real heavy hitters, sluggers back and forth. And here, a subtle milling Merfolk deck against a mix of things, not particularly tightly focused, but Calafel won't care. Looking at those 5 monsters sitting in the red zone, they're focused on attacking and putting your life total in the bin.
Yep, and seeing these matches go long is a little bit different than we saw at Pro Tour LA in 2005 when Irvin Tormos in his first top 8 intentionally played a little bit, let's say, cautiously, so that there would be enough time for the cameras to pan on his game and he could mug for the shot a little bit.
A little bit of deliberate, was it, Mr. Tormos? Now, an interesting story about him. I heard rumors that he was in the country. And apparently someone had seen him on a flight. I don't know, maybe gone into flight attendance or something. But Irvin did not appear in the actual event. Irvin Thomas, one of those great characters on the tour. You talk about people with their game faces, and they're very serious. Irvin is a real joker, pretty much at the table as well.
Yep. He's such a joker that it rubs off on his friends, because the story that I heard was that he had school or prior commitments, and that the rumors that he was present on the plane but did not arrive in the country were related to a prank that I believe Zach Hill and Steve Saban were trying to pull on Jacob Van Lunen. So Irvin's quite a character, and so are most of his friends.
That is certainly true. Now, Jacob Van Lunen, that is another guy who doesn't do serious for more than 3 seconds if he can help it.
No, and back in the game here, Rich, we've got a pretty significant series of plays. The all-in attack is going to be stifled by a series of blocks, and the bounce spell that his opponent managed to play in order to remove the largest attacker. Now, the Spaniard is going to be able to get 4 damage in. Of course, that's going to be undone by the fact that the Changeling hero will gain him 4 life and kill that Elvish Warrior, I believe it's blocking. It's interesting to consider the options that Falafel has on the Tarfire.
Absolutely.
Of course, Calafel could kill the Drowner of Secrets. He could also kill the Mirror Entity, and his board's just been severely decimated here. Looks like he's for sure going to get milled for 2 as well, provided whichever creature he kills remembers to turn sideways. Imagine we're going to see the Winnower Patrol post-combat, possibly the Bowmaster. But, yep, that's the looks like the patrol.
Now, as far as Califel's deck is going, from above, of course, we can't see the stack.
Sure.
But Scott tells us it's probably in the low teens, round about that kind of level, so still in double figures.
Ooh, that's
there is the
interesting.
Tarfire.
That's going to allow him. That's going to allow his opponent to mill an extra card with that Amiibo
Yeah,
Changeling
there we
coming
are.
into play. And
Fistful of Force goes by for Califel there.
yep, you don't want to second guess. You don't want to second guess players because, like I've been saying, they're very good. They're here for a reason. But you got to wonder about whether or not it might have been better to take care of that Drowner of Secrets and allow himself to stay ahead on the board, particularly with that live draw available to him.
A Johnny Goldmane.
That was huge.
Wow.
After his board got decimated like it did the previous turn, he's now behind on the board, and that Ajani will help keep his opponent ahead on the life as they try to find enough tokens to possibly fit on the card.
So we've got 4 there right away, and you would imagine that he's going to head towards 6.
My creature orchid.
No, instead he says, okay, +1/+1.
Interesting choice, but with
And they've
the
got
Fistful of
vigilance.
Force. The Fistful of Force gone and a lot of the burn spells out, you're looking at creatures that can now block everything on the board except the Cricket, which is going to get through on the top. Now with Ming at 7 life, that's not that significant because he's got at least 4 attacks from the Golden Cricket before it matters. But with these creatures now having vigilance, they can each get in against that Winnower Patrol, potentially kill it. The Drowner would even kill it and still live, and they can all still mill. So as we were talking about that race and the resources, Ming's now ahead on it both in combat and in dealing with the cards in the library. So it's not looking good for Califel, despite the fact he's at 20 life, which is misleading.
Yeah, much more to the point. He has 13 cards we now have confirmed, thanks to Scott Johns down on the floor. 13 cards left in the library. There goes Mill. That'll be 12.
16.
Yep.
All right.
And Ming's going to still get in for some damage there.
Untap. And here comes Kinship.
No,
Oh,
the
no, that's
Winnower-
gone. Sorry,
yeah,
it's
the
the Elvish
should.
Warrior left. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're down to 11 cards in the library.
Yep, he just actually hit a blank. The Rivals Duel, and it's one of those cards that, like as we said before, it could sometimes be a 2-for-1. It could sometimes be very good. In this circumstance, it's actually not going to do anything because he's got a 2/3 and a 2/2, staring down 2 creatures from his opponent who share a creature type. Of course, the Amiiboid Changeling is all creature types and can give all creature types to the Drowner of Secrets.
Gotta love them goats.
Yep, the Drowner of Secrets is a 2/4, so Rivals Dueling that, unless he does it post-combat, will not get him anywhere. It will only deal 2 damage to creatures which survive.
So Califel up against it now, 2-1 down.
Flying.
There you see him.
I'm sorry. Attack and flying.
Okay.
Yeah, attack and flying.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
And I'm thinking about the other one.
Yep, he's going to consider whether he's got to attack the Ajani or whether he's got to attack his opponent. We're going to take the Ajani, try to get it down out of the game.
Down to just 1 counter now, and Ajani began at 4.
Yep. Seems like a reasonable play, simply because of the fact that with Golden Cricket being the only creature he's able to get through, Ajani counters at each turn by gaining him 2 life, by gaining his opponent 2 life, rather, Ming. He's going to play the Bowmaster post-combat. Ming's going to mill him. He's going to count the graveyard here. And one of the things he might be doing here, Rich, is determining how many cards are in his opponent's library without having to count it. And there's an easy way to do that. If you're aware that his opponent is playing 40 cards, which nearly everyone is, you can count the cards in the graveyard, count the cards in play, and count the cards in hand. You'll know how many cards are not in his library, and by simple arithmetic, you can determine how many are there.
Since we're there, explain to us why everyone does play 40 cards, because it's listed as a minimum. I could play 60 if I wanted, or certainly I could play 41, 42, 43. Explain to listeners and the viewers back at home, why do I stick with 40?
Sure. And this is one of the very first strategy principles that was developed for Magic the Gathering by the players. The idea is that if you have 40 cards, you play the 40 best cards you drafted, and any one of those cards is going to be very good. So the idea is that with 40 cards, your odds of getting to the card you want is much better. And we just saw a huge play from Ming.
That is Stony Brook Schoolmaster up at the top of your screen on the right. Goodness
very good draw
gracious me, what can Califel do from there?
How many cards does he have left? He might even be dead this turn with 1, 2, 3, 4.
I should go.
No, he passes the turn, but we are very, very nearly done.
Yep, she went up to 9 life with his Ajani.
Califel, you would think, would need like an austere command here, and even that probably would leave him with no room for manoeuvre. He's got Rivals Duel, Kinsbell, Balloonist in hand. Kalafel counts his library. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yep,
by the looks of things.
He's dead on the following turn.
He's gone, isn't he?
Yep, because at the end of this turn, his opponent's going to mill him for 4 cards. The Stony Brook Schoolmaster tapping will give him an extra Merfolk. That'll give him for all 4. And then on his own turn, Ming will be able to mill for 5 because he'll tap the Stony Brook Schoolmaster again and get another token. So I think
that is sufficient.
Yep, I think Kalafel is not only down in this game, but that'll be the 3rd win for his opponent. And,
that would be it, and we would have a Chinese, not only first top 8, it would be the first semi-finalist, and he would go on to play Mario Pascoli in the bottom bracket.
Still some magic to play, though.
Yeah. Well, we saw with the Waffa match when I was all ready to get Waffa out the door, and Guillaume's like, no, I'm a Pro Tour winner, and I'm here for the long haul.
Yep.
So we'll see what we see. There they are in the red zone.
Kalafel's crafty. He's got a couple cards in hand. He's going to give his opponent the opportunity to make a mistake here and possibly allow him to utilize his Rivals Duel. It's going to be interesting to see what Ming managed to pull up, whether he smells a snake. It's possible at only 9 life. That Golden Cricket's going to get in for sure. He's got to consider whether there are plays his opponent can make that he knows of that haven't been milled that could potentially deal him lethal damage. Fistful of Force is a good example, potentially a +4/+4. Of course, he saw 1 disappear from his opponent's deck. He's seen the number of Tar Fires that have been in the graveyard, so it's a close race. He's going to mill. Yep, he's going to mill with the Stony Brook. That'll give him a chump blocker, the 1/1 token.
One of the fundamental rules of Magic is if you don't have the opportunity to be good, allow your opponent the opportunity to be bad.
Yep.
Ming looks yet another play. You really can't tell what he's feeling, but he must be excited because from 1 down in your first top 8, you're probably a little bit scared that things aren't going well. Comes back to 2-1. This game has developed where he's looked under a lot of pressure and he's just eked his way back in. We saw that one of the other games was incredibly close, but here he's eked his way back into the game. Ajani's made an enormous difference, and now there goes another mill.
Yep.
And he's... I'll get rid of Ajani, sure, but meanwhile, let's see what he comes out. Does he make the Balloonist here? And say, at least I get a chance to fly in, if Ming can't count. Alright, taps 2, 3, 4. I think this is... Or is the Rivals Duel? Which have we got?
Could be either or.
Okay, Rivals Duel comes out. And it's Stony Brook. Oh!
Okay.
Just going to count.
Ming says, yeah, there we go. No, mill. There goes Wedded Conscience. And
sorry.
looks like they're just
True.
Looks like Ming's so excited. He knows what's coming up on this turn. He accidentally put an extra card in the graveyard. Judge had to intercede there.
Hey, why don't I just put everything in the bin? So 1.
It does, but it's not even relevant whether he's got it in there. He'll get him this turn. Puts an extra Merfolk into play. That'll get the last one.
There is the hand. The first Chinese player in the top 8 is the first Chinese player in the semi-final. There you see it. He looks ecstatic, doesn't he? Well... No, but there he is. He is into the semi-final. Congratulations to Ming Shi of China. Commiserations to the 19-year-old student from Spain, Joel Kalafel. He acquitted himself admirably in a monster top 8. Obviously disappointed not to go further. He would have thought Shi might have been the weak link. We will now, of course, take you to the one remaining match of the top 8. That is Nikolai Herzog up against Marcio Carvalho. They are all square, and we are ready for the final game of the quarterfinals.
If I tap the changeling and if I
So we're on the way. There you see the cameras coming across to the patiently waiting Nikolai Herzog, Marcio Carvalho. And waiting for us, there's Devon Lowe, lead developer for the set. Devon must be very thrilled with the way that Lorwyn Morning Tides come out. He's had a really good weekend, seeing a lot of people very pleased with the format.
Yeah, and he deserves some accolades. Devon's a really nice guy. For folks at home that don't get to see him or haven't gotten to interact with him, he's just the nicest guy in the world. And got to spend a beautiful weekend with his girlfriend and spent Valentine's Day in Kuala Lumpur. Pretty nice way to spend a Valentine's Day. But yeah, did a lot of hard work for this set. A lot of pros really happy with it, really excited about it, enjoyed it. Seems pretty fair and balanced. Got to give him a lot of credit.
Let me just check. Devon Lowe, head of development, got to spend Valentine's Day in Kuala Lumpur with his girlfriend, and I got to spend my Valentine's Day in Kuala Lumpur with you.
Okay. Rich, what are you trying to say?
Babe, Right, so here we go. Eyes down on the prize for the final game. Nikolai Herzog is underway. We've got Swamp, 2 forests in play.
Looks like that might be the cream of the crop. We'll take a quick look real quick here.
So maybe we're going to actually get a chance to see that in action, the card that BDM was very interested in.
Yeah.
We've got Giltleaf Palace on the other side for Marcio with his forest and swamp. It is indeed cream of the crop from 9 miles away. Bill Stark identifies the card. You are the winner. Jagged Scar Archer is next for Nico. And Carvalho says, in a turn, let's have a couple of elvish guys. The clash is going to be essentially irrelevant. Looks like he's got Treefolk Harbinger on top. Nico gets rid of a land. And what's Marcio going to do? He's still pausing, trying to work out whether he wants the Harbinger or not. He's got plenty to go at, so I guess it would be a reasonable play, but perhaps he's light on land. We haven't seen his hand yet, so in fact he puts it on the bottom. So we'll see what he's aiming for. In with the 2 Elf Warrior tokens. Warrior is one of the big sort of changes with Morningtide coming out, very popular, and so many cards are just there by accident. It's like Lunk Errant. It's a giant, but along the way it's a warrior.
Yep. Interesting thing to note with that cream of the crop. Putting the cards on the bottom or choosing to take a look at the top is a May effect, which could potentially be relevant because you only get to keep one of the cards. The rest have to go on the bottom. So if Nikolai Herzog is looking for a runner-runner situation, which he hits 2 cards back-to-back, he might not want to hit the cream of the crop because if he hits one and the other, one of them's going to the bottom, and he could put himself out of a position.
Yeah,
we're a long way from that, but it's an important thing to remember.
For sure. Have you ever noticed that Magic's a really, really complicated game? I think that's why we love it so much, truthfully. You know, I think if it was much simpler than this, we could go and play Snap.
After 13 years, I've seen a lot more Magic players than Tiddlywinks players, let me tell you.
Yeah, that is true. I was County Tiddlywinks champion, actually, but still. All right, so Jagged Scar Archer's in, but we've got Giltleaf Ambush of his own. A couple of warriors come into play.
Nice thing about that Giltleaf Ambush with the Jagged Scar Archers on the board is that it's actually a mini giant growth. So you get 2/1/1 tokens, and you +2/+2 on the Jagged Scar Archers can cause a lot of problems for an unprepared opponent.
Absolutely. Well, one impact of the Ming-Shi match going long is that Nico's had plenty of time to put that mistake from his upkeep well out of mind, because that's probably the best part. Looking at the local time here, it's 10 to 2 in the afternoon. That is probably the best part of an hour ago, that upkeep.
Yep. And so, it's a bit of a cooler effect, something they do in the American professional football when the kicker has to make a big kick for the extra point.
They ice the kicker, don't they?
They'll
Absolutely.
call timeout. So Nico got a little benefit there by having that timeout for the coverage.
Didn't help the Green Bay Packers, though, did it? Was it Nate Kading, kicker for the Giants, took down the Green Bay Packers, I do believe?
Nate Kading, actually an Iowa City boy, hometown hero from where I'm from.
I can't believe it. Everything I come up with, these people come from Iowa. Does everybody live in Iowa?
No, hardly any at all.
Just the important people. All right, okay, I hear you. Thorntooth Witch is in hand. Their Weed Poplar Shaman and Seed Guide Ash. So that's what Carvalho looking at there.
What he's working
Draws
with.
a card. Laser Forest.
Not a bad grip if he can get some land to play it.
And out comes...
Looks like Everbark Shaman to me, and Everbark Shaman's the 3/5. You can tap it to remove a Treefolk card from your graveyard. Of course, that would include Changeling cards as well, and that would give you the ability to search out 2 forests, put them in play tapped. Now, that might not seem like very much, but it essentially says draw 2 cards. Of course, those 2 cards are lands, and they automatically go into play, but when you're trying to get to 6 mana for a Thorntooth Witch or for any number of other large spells, maybe to play 2 things at once, that's a pretty handy thing to have in common.
Yeah, and just as a straightforward bonus of thinning your library, you're going to see that much. And it's a very incremental percentage. Magic's a game of incremental percentages. You look at a card like Paperfin Rascal. In most decks, that averages out at 2.38 2.38. It's either a 2-2 or it's a 3-3. And, that's kind of the average that. And I mean, a lot of the maths behind Clash is really fascinating. If you're a mathematical mind, there are some great articles out there on the web talking about how Clash works, the kind of hidden math of Magic.
Absolutely, and it's a really interesting mechanic, I think, for the R&D community that came up with it. It allows you to make sure that you're hitting some of the cards that you want. So early on, if you need the lands, you can filter to the lands. If you need the action cards, you can get to the action cards. And the more players get to hit the cards they need or want, the less variability there is in the matchup regarding mulligans or mana screw or mana flood, anything like that. So it's a really strong mechanic.
That is a Cloud Thresher.
Damage first, then this.
Damage first.
Right? Yeah. Just afraid of missing a window or something.
Afraid of missing a window or something.
Still a remnant from missing that upkeep. He's playing pretty tight. Still no counter in the top of his deck. Of course, he doesn't have any upkeep effects in play, but will be interesting to see if he maybe takes advantage of that rule. Of course, that rule change has come into effect since the time Nikolai Herzog was at the top of his heyday, so it's entirely possible he's not aware of that change and doesn't know that he could put one of the counters on the top of his deck to remind him of his upkeep. We may not see the winner or patrol this game, so it might not matter, but interesting difference between the pros that are from the old school and the new school. Looks like he's considering pretty carefully with those 7 cards. Hopefully he doesn't have a whole bunch of good ones in there, so he doesn't have to put them on the bottom. But at least keeping the best of the top 7 is a pretty powerful effect for him.
Yeah, that cream of the crop is the kind of card. It's one of those hand grenade cards that a lot of bad players will simply not know what it really is or does. A lot of great players can do good things with it. And the people who are in real danger, it's a bit like when you learn to fly. The first 20 hours, you don't know how to fly. After 60 hours, once again, you really don't know how to fly, even though you've got your license. But between 20 and 60 hours, you actually think you can fly the plane. And that's when dangerous things happen. And for those mid-ranking players, Cream of the Crop is a card that you can really just have explode in your face if you don't quite understand the possible things you can do with it.
Yeah.
The kind of card that gives pros an edge.
Yep. And that's exactly the type of card that Nikolai Herzog and guys like John Finkel, even Mike Ron, who's now watching from the Peanut Gallery, all those types of cards benefit them a great deal because, as I said before, more decisions, more options, more better for the good players.
Absolutely. All right, so Herzog ponders his options. There is Carvalho nodding away. It looks not dissimilar to Guillaume Waffatapa. That little finger just under the lip there, concentrating hard.
Kind of reminds me of Yuri Peleg, actually, from the World Championship.
Yes. But with a slightly better barber, maybe. All right, so Cloud Thresher comes in because that's quite large.
Yep. And, of course, it shocks both players in addition to getting 2 damage to all flyers when it comes into play. Nico's going to make a pretty strong play against his opponent's Tree Folk, the 3/3 Vanquisher. And that, of course, has Death Touch, which means his opponent's creatures will die when blocking or when taking damage from it, regardless of whether or
Don't
not
care what the size
they're
is.
bigger. Yep.
It's just in the bin.
And as a 1/2 punch there, the card he revealed to Elf to make sure it costs less, Nameless Inversion.
Oh, hello.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it seems like Scott John's reporting for the floor. That was what he pulled for the Cream of the Crop. Good card to pull. So worth pointing out that Nico didn't opt to use Cream of the Crop on that the Vanquisher as he played it. That might be intentional, as we said before. There is cause for not doing it every time.
Oh no!
But it looks like
Nico,
it looks like he just realized what's going on.
I can't believe I did that. Looking at that, and he. Yes.
Taking some water down.
Should have left it out of my deck.
Should have left it out of my deck. I didn't know.
Same thing happening again. Like, look, top 6, 7, think forever, then forget my plan. Like,
wow.
And you heard him mention that he took forever to think and then forgot his plan. And what he's talking about is concentrating so long on doing one particular plan of action that you just sort of have a brain fart and forget, after spending so much time coming up with the solution, what your solution was and delivering on that. It's a very common situation that happens to a lot of people. Nobody likes it when it happens, but it is something that comes up.
2 cards? Yeah.
Yep, we're going to see the Thorn 2
switch.
Very, very important play against Nico.
Big sigh from Nico. Big sigh.
And Nico is a guy who had gotten a reputation over the years as making untight technical plays from time to time. He doesn't have another creature in his hand, so he's not going to be able to utilize the cream of the crop this turn.
However, he does have Lignify, which takes care of business, because, okay, 0-4, that's the irrelevant bit right now. It's lose all abilities, thank you, that's important, that keeps him out of range of that Thorntooth Witch.
Right, and even though he did make a mistake, and he may be concerned that people are going to question his play later, he understands that, there's still a game to play. He's still going to get in with his 7-7 and his 3-3. And mistakes are mistakes. They happen. You move on. You keep playing. There's still Magic to be played.
And although you look at the taciturn Carvalho, and that seems to be the attitude of the day, it is quite exciting to see someone who you're inside the head of, to look at Nikolai Herzog and go, I know that guy is bleeding right now and really, really wants this game. And, there's something quite powerful about that. Yeah. I'm not exactly rooting for Nikolai, but I really want the mistake itself not to be costing him.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because, Carvalho may have an opponent who's potentially flustered, but it wasn't through any action of his own. It wasn't like he even used any mental games to try to get into his opponent's head. Although we did see in the first game that we watched here, in which Nico missed that Winnower Patrol, Marshall might have been trying to impact his opponents paying attention to the upkeep by asking that question.
A little bit of timing chicanery going on there, yeah.
Yep. Completely legitimate, pretty crafty.
3U, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of thing is perhaps more important now than it's ever been. When I was talking to players before the tournament started, and I said, do you have an edge during the draft? Do you have an edge during deck building or in play? Which are the three sort of schemes of the game? Where does the edge really come? And they said, almost to a man, they said, you know what? People know what to draft. There are pick orders out there. Everyone practices Magic Online, though couldn't for this particular tournament, which is one of the reasons, of course. They have these formats when Magic Online isn't available for thousands upon thousands of games to be analysed and sifted through. The pros get to have first crack, if you like. But that facet of the game, the pro said most people know roughly what to do with the draft. The deck build, no, there's really very little edge there. You might get a tiny edge over understanding that 16 land is possible, rather than, I really don't know, I don't want to get myself screwed, so I'll play 17 and be safe. And you have a tiny edge there, maybe. But almost to a man, they said, you know what? Particularly Sam Stein was very vocal about this. He said, you know what? It's when you get to the cards and you actually have them in play, and it's like, can I make this guy dance? Can you make your guys dance? Well, turns out mine can do the quick step, the foxtrot, and the tango. How about you, Disco Boy?
Yep. Marcio had look at a hand with Elvish Harbinger and a Fertile Ground. Not too much action there. So if Nico can survive with what's on the board, and granted Marcial's board position is pretty solid,
yep.
he could get himself back in the game if he remembers to utilize his cream of the crop.
All right, so Fertile Ground for Carvalho. That's not particularly exciting with 43,000 mana in play.
Of course, most of them searched out with that Everbark Shaman.
Yep.
They're playing a game of draw go here. With
this goes on the stack, right? So if I play Changeling, does this go on the stack? Then I can pump this and look for more.
Nikolai Herzog with a strong question there to see if he gets to sneak a peek at a couple extra cards.
Okay.
Okay, so table judge there in the nattily attired judge, might I say, though. We've got some pretty incredible outfits. I cannot believe I spent an entire day on camera in one of those green.
You didn't like the shirts?
I think they were incredible. That's the neutral word I've gone for.
I like the shirts.
I think they suited you, Bill. I got to say, I can see you and your fellow Iowans in shirts like that.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. It's always nice once in a while have a pro tour, spice things up a little bit.
Absolutely, and I know, in fact, so many pros actually turn up even now wearing their Honolulu shirts, because that is just one of the coolest things they've ever had on tour.
Yep. Looks like Nico's going to keep a good one on top there, the Imperious Perfect, which is going to give him some inevitability if his opponent can't come up with a solution to it.
Explain what you mean. That's another key word that comes up at high-level Magic. Mm-hmm. What is inevitability?
Well, Rich, inevitability is a term that means, given the situation as it stands, going infinite, quote-unquote, taking forever, you would eventually overwhelm your opponent and win for certain. And the reason that he would gain inevitability is because the Imperious Perfect would continue, regardless of what other card draws provide, cranking out 2/2 creatures each turn, 1/1 with the +1/+1, and that would eventually overwhelm his opponent's resources. He simply has to have enough attackers over the number of blockers his opponent has to deal 12 damage.
All right, fair enough. So inevitability, if that's a new one to you, you've probably experienced it a million times. It's like, I can't lose. Well, that's kind of inevitability. But that's what we call it at this level. So thanks for that, Bill, for that explanation.
No problem.
All right. 10 monsters on the board. Nothing in the red zone. A lot of land each.
Nico's figuring out what he wants to keep on top from his cream of the crop for the Imperious Perfect. Now, with limited decks only being 40 cards, it's important to remember that knowing the order of his library is going to potentially become relevant. We've seen him take 7, 10, and now 12 cards, keep 3 of them, and put the rest on the bottom. It won't be soon before he's cycling back through cards he's already seen. If Nico can remember the order in which he put them back, he'll have an advantage over his opponent because he'll know every single card draw that's coming up.
Is that quite an ask? That sounds like quite an ask, particularly given his mental state at the moment with just simply triggering the thing. I mean, is that the kind of thing that pros do remember? I mean, I know that in particular, if you think of the German juggernaut, not only Kai, but Dirk Babarowski, Marco Bloom, they made an absolute fortune out of memorizing pack orders a long time ago. The idea that you could just, memorize where cards lay and where they were going around the draft, you would see that. And they did extremely well out of that. Is this something that they would do? Because I would never expect to remember the, 12, 15 cards I'd seen in a game.
It's definitely something that you want to try to work on. You know, if your mental game's not able to remember all the cards there, or at least remember the order that the relevant cards are in, and then blank, blank, blank with the lands.
Okay, so Cloud Thresher comes in.
It's a 7/7. Looks like the Portuguese player from Lisbon is trying to figure out the best way to block.
So, what are we going to do, Marcio Cavalli? There he is, thinking away. Hand to mouth again. And Herzog. I tell you what, if Herzog comes out of this, he will be the happiest man to see the lunchtime finish line in the building, I guarantee. Because he's got some serious head thinking to do.
Yep.
Triple block. Have we got a spell coming out of Cavalli's hand? He's thinking about it.
Yep. It looks like Nico indicated he's going to try to kill the 4/4 and the 3/3 from his opponent, get a 2-for-1. Of course, his opponent will get to search out 3 forests when his Seed Guide Ash goes to the graveyard. But at this point in time, with the amount of lands he's searched out already with the Everbark Shaman, it doesn't look like that's going to be that relevant. And of course, got the Gilt Leaf Seer in play. Well, he's got the Fistful of Force that we saw. Gilt Leaf Seer would potentially benefit from the Seed Guide Ash going to the graveyard because it would let him thin out some lands and then put the top 2 action cards on top.
All right.
A lot of thinking to do. Carvalho's determined he's going to play the Fistful. Now he's got to figure out which creature he wants to save. The Weed Pruner right at the moment, not doing that much. Not doing that much for him. His opponent doesn't have any 1/1s or X1s that he's able to kill each turn. Looks like he's going to save the 4/4.
And it also looks like, I don't know whether you picked up a warning there for slow play, but he certainly got an indication that it was time to move on. Perhaps the judge is hungry.
Yeah. Moving into that lunch break after this round is over. Yeah, good point.
No, they don't do it like that. I can definitely assure you of that. That's not part of the DCI program.
No, and it's important to remember that even though you have a tough situation, you still have to make a decision in a timely fashion. And Fistful of Force on 2 creatures, when you've got this type of pressure on you, you want to make the right decision, but sometimes judges have to remind you that you need to hurry up.
Absolutely so. Spring cleaning for the Lignify.
Now, if he hits on the Clash here, he's also going to get the cream of the crop for free.
Ooh. Alright, so Clash, that's Game Trail Changeling.
Just enough.
And that's enough, isn't it? Yeah.
No, it's just enough to prevent the Clash to go off because his opponent had Violet Paul. I'm not sure that I want to prevent the Clash from going off in that way.
Alright.
It might have been Skeletal Changeling.
Yeah, I think
Was
it
that
could
what
be.
it was? Yeah.
So that's Earthbrawn, just there from Nico, was that? A Briar Horn. Let's have a look.
Oh.
It was Earthbrawn, yeah.
Yep, and his opponent's still sitting on a lash out, I believe, that he's been trying to hit the mountain for at least the red source. It doesn't look like he's been able to do it, and that certainly is coming back to haunt him. Looks like we're going to see the Game Trail Changeling from Nico. He will not fail to forget the cream. He'll definitely be resolving it. Unfortunately, he sees 4 lands. Probably not what he was hoping to find. I'm going to put 3 of them on the bottom, put 1 of them on top. If he can get his cards under control there. Yep, there we see him counting through his library. Counting through his library, finding out how much further until he cycles back through the cards that he knows. And that lash out actually is in Nikolai Herzog's hand. Said Carvalho, meant the Norwegian. Looks like he must have boarded it in for whatever reason against his opponent, because that started off in his sideboard.
Yep, certainly did.
That was one window I needed, I think. Yeah.
You can hear Nico talk about the
Yeah.
window.
Absolutely, and that spring cleaning pretty crucial for so many land going through. You would have had to get through those in regular fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. If he hadn't had that spring cleaning, if the spring cleaning had won the clash, that would have been rough for him.
Carvalho's getting excited now. A little bit more animated.
Yep. Starting to feel a game slip away from him that he thought he had firmly in control there for a little while.
Well,
Sees 2 land with the Gilt Leaf Seer himself. Looks like he missed the Weed Pruner upkeep. Could have killed that 1/1 elf, I believe.
Guardians of Cloverdale, I do believe, has come down for 7 mana. It's a 4/5.
Sorry,
Oh, and yes, there we are.
He
You
did
called it,
miss
Bill.
and it is a required action. Yep.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
the
right.
judge,
Yeah, we should let him do
I think it's like, yes, of course, it's fine. Yeah. They're going to just come in and fix this.
No, I remembered, but I forgot to give -1/-1 to Greek.
Interesting to see what the ruling's going to be here.
How many time has passed?
Like,
Yeah, that's
I do
Hector
the card. I do
Fuentes,
the
one of
card
the
and I'm on
Mexican
main page.
judges, pretty big in the DCI. There's Toby Elliott in the background, in the shirt, the pink shirt there. He's the head judge for the tournament. It's actually been a very smooth tournament, very smooth. It's particularly difficult, 350 odd players.
I have to give you a warning for a game rule violation. The game trail changing was actually 5/5 at the time it came into play because of the perfect, and you only looked at 4 cards. So just please bear that in mind. Thank you.
Wow, that's another rough beat for Nikolai Herzog. Had the 5/5 game trail changeling, and that could be huge because he saw 4 lands. If he'd have seen that extra card, he might have been able to dig a little bit deeper. Looks like we got a 2/2 Woodland Changeling from Nico, who's staring down a really uncompromising board position with that Guardian of Cloverdale, putting 3 1/1 Kith King creatures into play. And is definitely looking bad for the Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, it isn't just one mistake now, it's several, and also, you know, they don't just accumulate in gameplay terms, they prey on you, and it is like incremental growth. It's like 1, 3, 6, 10. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4 in the way you feel about them.
Yep, it starts to wear you down, Rich, and eventually you start questioning whether you have the right to win the matchup, whether you should win a game in which you just played poorly and in such a skill relevant format. You really start to second guess yourself.
You've also got to remember that they sent down a draft now the best part of 3 and a bit hours ago, and although they haven't been playing that entire time, obviously they had a little breather while we went to see the Chinese guy in action. The fact remains that they've been sitting under the lights, cooking under the pressure, not yet through to the semi-final, hoping their deck's going to hold up, and that all builds and builds and builds.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it absolutely does. It's just like any other high-stress situation. You just never know when that could lead someone to buckle.
Mind you, a buckling Nico Herzog is a lot better than a lot of people who aren't under pressure.
Exactly. And as we've harped on, even if Nico's making mistakes, even if we're seeing mistakes in this top 8, these are still world-class players, a Hall of Fame player, excellent player, a little bit rusty after coming back and getting into the top 8, but still very solid. Never want to see him at your draft pod.
Nope. And you look to, I wonder what the math is in terms of 15 rounds of Swiss.
Yeah.
You play a minimum of 30 duels right there, plus, let's say half of the match is 37, 38, 39. So we're maybe like around about 42, 43 for the matches for each of these. Each of these plays 43 games.
A ton of Magic, and that's if they're not doing side drafts with their friends after they get done during the day. And some of these guys are.
Absolutely, they really are. And I would imagine that already some of the players out from the top 8 are busy going in search of draft packs.
Yep.
So.
We saw Atron out in the audience watching for a little while. It's not out of the question for some of these pros to try to pick up on tells that their opponents in the top 8 could potentially give away on camera. We saw Ming Shi shuffling cards nervously, but mostly just trying to educate themselves. Just because Nikolai Herzog, John Finkel, Mike Hron has one perspective on a format doesn't mean they're not willing to look at what their peers are also thinking about a format and see what they can gain from that.
Absolutely. I was chatting with Zvi before the tournament started, and he was having all sorts of apparently casual conversations with people, and all the time, you're logging away the information. What do they think? How much have they drafted? What little tidbits can you pick up? Even if it's just about a simple card interaction that you just haven't yet experienced, because, a big set and a small set, you've got 450 odd cards there, and they all do different things. That's why Magic's so great.
Yep. That's why it can be tough on coverage, trying to remember everything, all the names, all the details, all the specific elements that you're looking at seeing. But yeah, that much information is tough for anyone to try to compute, especially with a set like Morningtide just having come out so recently.
For sure. That's our excuse. We're sticking to it. All right, so.
Nico looks a little shaken up, I got to be honest. He's trying to figure out that block, but it looks very difficult for him to come up with a block here that somehow pulls him out of this situation.
Yeah, he's on 10 right now, 12 to 10. Marcio's still got plenty back behind him. He's got the Thorntooth Witch. He's got the Gilt-Leaf Seer, which is helping chunter through his deck. The little Kithkin, they're not doing a huge amount, but they're still bodies that Nico doesn't have answers for.
Yep.
So Nico does the blocking dance on the table.
Trying to figure out a way to get some creatures traded.
If he does that, he's gonna take something like 8 as things stand. 4 from the Guardians, 1 from the Skeletal Changeling, 3 Kithkin. Is that all right? So he's taking 8 right now, and he's on 10 as we speak. Is that right?
Sure.
It does put him, it does put him in a position where he can pump his Ghostly Changeling, so he can get 2 of the potential attackers off the board, provided his opponent doesn't have any type of effect.
Like a fistful or something.
Exactly, and then hopefully he's got to be hoping to try to hit a miracle. His final Revels would help deal with 5 of the threats on his opponent's board. Now that he's got an extra creature, he's going to Thorntooth Witch, and it doesn't look good.
And now Herzog's smiling, but he isn't smiling because he's winning, and there is the hand.
Yep, that's the hand.
Quarterfinals are done. Herzog head in hands. Carvalho looking pretty taciturn still, but he has taken a monster game there to take the final quarterfinal by 3 games to 2. And that means that we have the quarterfinals done. We have a semi-final lineup. Well done, Marcio. Carvalho got over the winning line in the end. So what we're going to do is take a look then at the quarterfinals, a quick recap for you before we go to lunch. So the deal is approximately this. At the top of the bracket, we've got Nikolai Herzog. He won 2 games, but 3 was the finish line. 3, Marcio Carvalho. Surprise or no?
A little bit of a surprise, but as we said earlier, I think that was the toughest matchup to try to pick the winner for. Both the decks were a little difficult to tell who was going to win, and you favor the Hall of Famer, but some of the mistakes he made, they just added up, and Carvalho did not give him any room to breathe, just kept the pressure on.
Okay, so Carvalho goes through there. He played the winner now in the semi-finals of Guillaume Wafataba and John Finkel. Well, that was a 3-0 sweep for Finkel, remember, and in a way, the big surprise there was that he managed the sweep with suboptimal draws.
Yes, absolutely, and I think Finkel's looking pretty good in that semi-finals matchup because Nikolai Herzog's Wrath of Gods aren't going to be there, so yeah. Definitely going to be a solid matchup, interesting to see, and I think Finkel's looking pretty good.
Yep, I agree with that. So then we're into the bottom half, and at the very bottom of the bracket, we had Mario Pascoli taking apart Mike Rohn 3-0 in a very, very quick, brutal affair, and we guess the key there, we're talking about Adam Chambers at Worlds last year. He said, you know what, there's all this talk of tribes. I draft a deck that goes Good spell, good spell, good spell, good spell. Removal, 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 removal. I kill everything that's relevant, and I have good monsters, and I don't particularly care what colours they are. They're probably going to be green and black to an extent, but that's just regular limited Magic, boys and girls. And that's his strategy, and that's pretty much what Pascoli's done. He has a ton of removal.
Yeah, a ton of removal. And on top of that, he has marquee cards like Chandra Nala and Thundercloud Shaman. When you put those together, boy, people, you got to watch out because those cards are just overwhelming sometimes.
All right, well, the person that has to watch out in the semi-finals is Ming Shi of China, because he came through 3-1, went 1 down behind Joe Calafel of Spain in his first top 8. Calafel made his first GP in Stuttgart only a few weeks back, made it here with a ticket courtesy of the Stuttgart performance, had a great run, but that came in the end to a juddering halt against the first Chinese top 8er. So, the semi-finals will be Marcio Carvalho against John Finkel. Johnny Magic 2 games away now from absolutely astonishing story. In the bottom half, the Chinese factor still there. Ming Shi, he will play Mario Pascoli. That is all coming up after lunch, because I've got to tell you, we're quite hungry. I'm hungry quite a lot, to be fair. So we are off to lunch, but we have got a real Magic treat for you on the way. It's going to be the final of Pro Tour Los Angeles 2005. That's going to be Antoine Ruel against Billy Moreno of the United States. Another top 8 Magic connection for BDM to enjoy over the lunch break. But for now, we are pretty much done, and all we got to say for now, until we come back, around about an hour and a half's time, the semi-finals will be on. If you want to catch some sleep in Europe, that's absolutely fine. Don't forget to set your alarm, though. Come back for the semi-finals, and Johnny Finkel will be back in town. The Magic is back. So for now, bon appetit. For Bill Stark, I'm your host, Rich Hagan, saying bye.